Hey everyone, and welcome to my reaction to the mostly complete lore of Hollow Knight, created by Mossbag. Now, I know that last summer I kind of briefly considered the idea of creating a separate reaction channel where I would upload videos of me reacting to films, TV series, anime, and so on. But that idea kind of just ended up fading into the background when I started playing Hollow Knight and the game just pretty much took over everything. However, over the course of that playthrough, I have on multiple occasions been recommended, advised, and it has been requested of me to watch this particular video at the end of my playthrough. Something that, as I understand it, has come to be somewhat of a tradition within the community. A Let's Player watching this video at the end of their playthrough. Now, I was somewhat on the fence about actually doing this reaction video. Partly because I've never done a reaction video before, and partly because I'm... what's the word? I'm somewhat picky when it comes to lore videos. Now, as a lore hunter, as you guys might imagine, I do actually enjoy watching lore videos, particularly when they're well made. And when I say well made, I mean that there is a solid line of reasoning, and most importantly, the person creating the lore video is putting forward their theories, hypotheses, or whatever as theories and hypotheses rather than stating them as fact. Something that I know not all creators of lore videos do, instead going the route of pretty much just claiming that what they have pieced together is just canon. So, not knowing what kind of lore video this is, I have been a little bit on the fence about whether I should make a reaction video to it or not. But considering I'm here now, I have decided I'm going to go ahead and do it. Mostly because at this point I am intensely curious as to why you guys kept recommending that I should, or requesting that I do this. Now, because I haven't made a reaction video before, I don't actually know how to go about editing it. So what I think I'm going to do is, after finishing with the reaction, I'm going to go ahead and watch some other people's reactions to this lore video to see how they handled the editing process. Because I really don't want my video to end up getting flagged by YouTube for, I don't know, copyright infringement or something like that. So I think that's how I'm going to do it. And I hope that the end result is going to be a good one. I don't know, as I said, I've never done a reaction video before, and subsequently I've never edited one either. But yeah, hopefully the end result is going to be fun for you guys to watch. So I'd say, without further ado, let's just dive straight into it. Warning, this video contains a few spoilers for Hollow Knight. Please bear that in mind before embarking on this journey. Or don't. I really don't care. I'm just text on a screen.
If you were to ask me, what is your favorite video game ever made? I would have to say Cory in the House for the Nintendo DS. But Hollow Knight would be a close second. Hollow Knight was released on February 24th, 2017 by Team Cherry, an indie game studio based in the mythical land of Adelaide, South Australia. Over the past 3 years, Hollow Knight has become an indie darling. The game has sold over 3.5 million copies. It was the opening game at ADGQ 2019. There's a Hollow Knight book, a line of plushies.
I really want to get the Wanderer's Journal someday. One of you guys mentioned it in comments and I looked it up. And I think that when I looked it up, there were none of them were in, There were none in stock. There was nothing in stock. I will eventually get my sentence right. I think there were none in stock. But someday, when I can, I am going to get the Hollow Knight Wanderer's Journal. For sure. And maybe a plushie of Grimchild. Someday. Maybe. And maybe a t-shirt. Like, I'm the type of nerd who, like, if I had the money, I would absolutely be the type of nerd who has all of the t-shirts. I would have all of the t-shirts. For sure.
T-shirts, nicotine patches,
warheads,
and even vinyl records for all you goddamn hipsters. Team Cherry had one goal when making Hollow Knight. They wanted to create a world that allowed players to get completely lost in exploration. We can see this desire in Hollow Knight's design.
And they succeeded
The levels
with
in
that.
Hollow Knight are massive, with secrets and rewards hidden in every nook and cranny. Be that powerful charms, special abilities, or, The game's navigation system requires the player to work for their map, forcing them to make a stronger mental image of the world in their head. Christopher Larkin's score and Ari Gibson's artwork lend to this as well, creating an atmosphere that the player won't want to leave. But there's one aspect of Hollow Knight that keeps people like me coming back. The world building.
Yes, absolutely. Love the world building in
When
games
Super
like
Metroid
these.
launched in 1994, it stood out for its amazing sense of immersion. Now in 1994, I was busy not being alive, but I've watched enough YouTube video essays to know that this game was a big deal. In case you didn't know, Super Metroid is basically the granddaddy of all Metroidvanias. That's why they're called Metroidvania.
I see.
Now in Super Metroid, there are
I didn't
moments
know
that give the
that.
player a sense of depth.
I've never even heard
the
of this
feeling
game
that this
before,
world
actually.
exists outside of Samus's interactions with it. In the room right before that diabetic crocodile thing, Samus can find the corpse of a random soldier. His inclusion here doesn't change the gameplay at all, but instead gives the player a sense of wonder about the world they are exploring. Who was this guy? Why was he here in the first place? Did he like jazz? Now, finding dead bodies and other random garbage is pretty cool, right? Well, Hollow Knight basically does the same thing, about a dozen times. Through its world building, Hollow Knight turns Hallownest into a living kingdom. You can sense the ancient history of the land when you look at dilapidated structures or giant barred doors. Nothing feels like it was put into the game randomly. There's a reason for it all. Except those reasons aren't the easiest to uncover. Hollow Knight.
Sorry. I wanted to pause and then the mouse didn't really pause. So I was recently watching a reaction video to a TV series, an animated TV series, and the reactor mentioned that there is never anything random in animation. If something is there in an animation, then it's there for a reason. They took the time to put it there. And I think that the same can be said actually about games as well. Not just Hollow Knight now, but also like the Soulsborne games, for example. If there is an object or a corpse or, I don't know, an NPC somewhere, they are there for a reason. They are there for a reason. Okay. So far I'm liking the video.
Its narrative is buried under layers of NPC dialogue, item descriptions, lore tablets, and even additional content like the Quarrel comic and Fangamer's Wanderer's Journal. These past 3 years have seen an insane amount of research by the Hollow Knight community to make sense of Team Cherry's sprawling world. We've even made it to the point where people are looking at the in-game signs to try and decipher Hallownest's logographic language. In this video,
What?
I hope...
Wait, what? Let me rewind a little bit.
We've even made it to the point where people are looking at the in-game signs to try and decipher Hallownest.
Thumbs up, hitchhiker symbol hailing a ride. That was good. Thought bubble recollecting a place that you recall. Things being dropped, deposit. GOPs, lines like a money box, the money box. Train map, multiple selections. Let me brighten my screen a little bit. If you would like a ride to a place that you recall, deposit Geo into the money box, select from the options, and you will be transported on a rail network to the place on the map. No way! That is genius! Oh, that is fantastic. You know, I did obviously, of course, I wondered about the inscriptions and if there was some kind of meaning to them, or if they were, okay, yeah, admittedly, if they were just decorative pieces, never meant to be deciphered. But, you know, looking at this absolutely makes sense. Oh, okay, love that. I didn't know that someone had done that. Oh, that is fantastic.
Logographic language. In this video, I hope to give you a long and detailed look into the world of Hollow Knight, exploring Hallownest's history and uncertain future. When I'm not busy making surprisingly accurate Super Smash Bros. Roster speculation videos, or insightful podcasts about beloved subjects like the Donkey Kong Country television series, or whatever this was supposed to be, I'm usually making videos about Hollow Knight. And while I am a seasoned Hollow Knight lore expert, I cannot confirm that every musing or theory presented.
Seasoned Hollow Knight lore expert. Treading into territory I don't like here. Treading into territory I don't like here. A seasoned expert. We'll see.
In this video is completely correct. I highly recommend checking out the lore section of the Hollow Knight Wiki.
Wait, what did he say? I'm sorry. I stopped at an inopportune moment.
Cannot confirm that every musing or theory presented in this video is completely correct.
Oh, okay, good.
I highly recommend checking out the lore section of the Hollow Knight Wiki if you want a more neutral explanation of Hollow Knight's lore. But if you're too lazy to read, then I suggest you sit back, order some Domino's pizza, or just grab a block of cheese from the fridge, and enjoy the mostly complete lore of Hollow Knight.
And we've come to the title.
It's a simple fact of life that every human worships a god, be that technology, ideologies, or in rare cases, God. As it turns out, the bugs in Hallownest pretty much operate in the same way. From the Mosskin born from the dream of a giant slug, to the emo kids of the ancient civilization who literally work.
I'm curious to see how much of what I put together from everything I came across during my playthrough and the lore that I've essentially puzzled together. I'm really curious how much of that is going to match up with what I'm about to hear in this video. Or how far off I'm going to be with my own. Or like how far off, how different my own lore theory is going to be.
Worship the darkness. There is no shortage of things to worship in the world of Hollow Knight. Our story begins with a creature very much worthy of worship. A creature born from the carcass of a worm. The carcass can still be found in the Kingdom's Edge, and it's our only good look at what worms actually looked like. At the time Hollow Knight occurs, it is suggested there are no worms left in the world. They were incredibly long creatures that featured little to no limbs. Another more mysterious property of worms was that they had some kind of prescience or foresight. Basically, they could see the future to some capacity. It isn't clear how effective this ability was. Considering how the entire race went extinct, this foresight ability must have been pretty shit. Getting back to this particular worm carcass, it is explained that this worm traveled across the distant mountains and wastelands beyond Hallownest. Once it arrived in Hallownest, the worm died. Except not really. Inside the maw of the carcass sits a pale broken egg, out of which hatched a new form of worm, a being of meager shell. This form of the worm is usually referred to as the Pale King, and he's the character basically responsible for everything that happens in Hollow Knight.
True.
The Pale King is a higher being, a type of creature that exists above all others. His body was said to shine with a radiant visage that harmed those who looked upon him.
Where was that written? Where was that written? Was it in the King's Idol description? Where was that written? How, and more importantly, how did I miss it? Okay, interesting. Well, I disagree with one element, kind of what Mossbag said, that the worm came to Hallownest and then died, but not really. As I understood it from Bardoon's, I think it was, like, the being's name I think was Bardoon. as I understood it from the dialogue with Bardoon, the worm came and then decided to transform, not die. Like, it was a conscious choice to reduce their form to that of something that could be accepted as part of the world of Hallownest.
The ultimate goal of the Pale King seemed to be in line with that of other worms. A line from the cryptic Mr. Mushroom reads, "Worms pull bugs into their thrall, till ages pass and kingdoms fall." In other words, it's just in their nature. Dogs wag their tails.
Again, a different interpretation of that line. Okay, this is going to be a fascinating video, and my reaction is going to be quite a bit longer than the video itself, I think. Okay, so the way that I interpreted that line was not as a general statement about worms, but rather, how should I put it? Not like a general statement about worms, but rather an extrapolation made about worms based on the actions of the worm that would become the Pale King, that had become the Pale King. Because there's nothing else that would suggest, I think, that, or at least I think, there's nothing else that would suggest that all worms were like this. Interesting.
Cats bury their shit, and worms bring massive amounts of bugs into their service in order to form long-standing kingdoms and civilizations. And here in a far corner of the world, the Pale King emerged from the corpse of his former self and began to build his eternal kingdom, Hallownest. There's just one slight problem. There's like people already living there. The area that would eventually become Hallownest was already filled with mantises, bees, moths, spiders, mushrooms, and bush cosplayers. Each of these groups were already operating with their own cultures and societies, and each group had a different interaction with the Pale King. One of the more receptive groups to the arrival of the Pale King were the mushrooms of the fungal wastes. These creatures were able to communicate with one another through one shared mind. The mushrooms viewed this shared mind as a strength, and they were kind of smug dickheads about it. Ultimately, the mushrooms wearily accepted the Pale King's rule, viewing his foresight as a shield to the dangers of the future. Another group living in the fungal wastes is the mantis.
How did you come to that conclusion, I wonder? It's true that the giant mushroom that was just now on the screen, let me go back. I see how this reaction is going to go.
And they were kind of smug dickheads about it. Ultimately, the mushroom.
Right. So it's true that when I hit, or at least I think it was when I hit this being, it's not necessarily a character, but this being with the dream nail, there was something along the line of, was it actually this mushroom? Was it actually this mushroom though? I seem to recall though that someone, okay, so now suddenly I'm doubting my own memory. Great. And it's not something that I wrote down in my little book where I kept track of the lore that I was uncovering. I can't remember if it was actually Queen Vespa now that said it, or if it was this character, but it was something along the line of, if you know, thanks to your foresight, what your future is going to be, why bother trying to escape it? Why fight against it? I can't remember if it was actually, maybe it was Queen Vespa and not the mushrooms that said it. Great. Okay. Never mind.
Wearily accepted the Pale King's rule, viewing his foresight as a shield to the dangers of the future. Another group living in the fungal wastes is the Mantis tribe. The Mantises have a rich cultural history reaching back to long before the birth of Hallownest. The Mantises are a proud tribe, believing in the importance of proving one's physical strength. The Mantises are fiercely territorial, but will show respect to those who display great power. These Fight Club enthusiasts were led by 4 powerful Mantis Lords, who I guess just kind of sat around waiting for outsiders to challenge them. The Mantis tribe had no interest in the Pale King's kingdom. but the two communities did come to a truce. In exchange for their independence from Hallownest, the Mantis tribe kept the beasts of Deepnest from invading Hallownest. Not sure why they didn't just...
Again, how did you reach that conclusion? How did you reach that conclusion? So it's like I remember thinking that obviously Deepnest and Hallownest were two separate kingdoms, you know, two separate nests, two separate kingdoms, and they definitely had a very tense relationship to each other, which was only somewhat improved thanks to the the agreement between Queen Hera and the Pale King, the agreement which resulted in Hornet's birth. But how did you reach the conclusion that the Mantis Lords had an agreement with the Pale King? They would be left alone in exchange for keeping the beasts of Deepnest out. I feel like, based on what I saw outside of the gate that opened after defeating the Mantis Lords and which led into Deepnest, based on what I saw right outside there, I would say that, like, it was my theory rather, that the Mantis tribe, being the warriors that they are, view the beasts of Deepnest as a sort of their natural enemy / prey. Because there were a lot of masks of shells from beasts from Deepnest impaled by the weapons of the Mantis tribe right outside that gate. I don't remember coming across anything that would indicate an alliance between the Mantis Lords and the Pale King,
Go out the
though.
other exits from Deepnest. But whatever. I'm not an expert on Border Patrol. I don't work at ICE anymore. Let's move on to Deepnest. Now, many of the different tribes of Hallownest were kind enough to leave lore tablets behind, detailing pretty much everything we need to know about them. Unfortunately, the bugs of Deepnest didn't do that. We know that the spiders of Deepnest had a monarchy because why not? Those are always good, right? Also, within Deepnest are a separate group of spiders that immigrated to Deepnest at some point in the past.
The Weavers.
This group was known as the Weavers, and they established their own culture and history within Deepnest. They used looms of silk to weave stories, spells, and shields. One thing we know for sure about Deepnest is that they really didn't want anything to do with Hallownest. The struggles of Deepnest-Hallownest relations would become painfully clear as time goes on, but for right now, it seems like the two remained fairly isolated from one another. Another section of pre-Hallownest includes Greenpath. Now, as far as we can tell, the mushrooms, mantises, and spiders of Deepnest didn't worship any higher beings. There is this giant mushroom corpse in the fungal core, but I don't think this is a higher being. I mean, who the hell would want to worship a fat-ass mushroom? Fat-ass slugs? Now that's dope. The land we know as Greenpath was created by the higher being known as Un. Un used her great mind to dream the vegetation of Greenpath into the once barren caverns. Un's followers, the Mosskin, were also born out of Un's dream, making her their creator. Greenpath at its height was actually much larger than we see in-game. At one point, Greenpath stretched into both modern-day Queen's Garden and possibly Fog Canyon. Greenpath's citizens showed themselves to be a fairly developed society. They built a temple at the Lake of Un in order to worship her, and they even had their own line of defense, with Moss Knights showing proficiency in combat, using nails and shells as weapons. The Law of Un continued to remain in effect even after the Pale King arrived, but it seems like they allowed the king to establish a road through their lands, leading travelers to the heart of Hallownest. Hence the name Greenpath. Yeah, Team Cherry really racked their brains when naming this area, didn't they?
Pilgrim's Route or Way,
Next,
I think it was.
we have the bees. And while there is no lore on how these bees can turn into fucking drills, or how they can ignore all known laws of aviation, we do know how they reacted to the Pale King. These bugs decided to seal their hive off from the rest of the world, with only patrol bees being able to enter and exit the hive.
Yes.
So yeah, the bees are pretty much pointless in this story. And finally we have the
I wouldn't call them pointless. I wouldn't call them pointless because, I mean, it's kind of like they're like a neighboring kingdom, really. They had their own queen in the form of Queen Vespa, and although they shut themselves off, I don't feel that they didn't have a role to play.
Moth tribe. In-game, the only moth settlement is in the resting grounds, but the tribe might have also inhabited.
Okay, I'll let you finish.
The Crystal Peak at one point.
Okay.
Now, as we all know, moths in real life are just complete assholes. As for the moths in Hollow Knight,
why?
Well, it's a bit complicated. The moth race is described as being a rather pacifist group, with few ever choosing to take up a weapon. During the Pale King's reign, the moth race delved amongst dreams and the dead, displaying the importance of remembering those who have passed, as well as learning how to shape dreams themselves. Similar to the Mothskin, the moth tribe was born from a higher being known as the Radiance. The Radiance is described as being a light in which the moth tribe basked, so she was basically a giant lamp to them. Another important aspect about the Radiance is her ties to dreams and a substance known as essence. Essence are the remains of wishes and dreams, and are represented in-game by these dream-catcher particle effects. Essence can take the form of whispering roots, as well as dream ghosts, both of which are memories taking root in the world. The Radiance appears to be a creature made of essence, but she isn't the only higher being to give off essence. Un has green particles, the Pale King has gray particles, and this sexy character named Grim gives off fiery red particles.
I never noticed that at the Lake of Un there were the green essence, like dream catchers. I call them dream catchers. I never noticed that there were the green ones in like around Un. And they were actually probably also there when I was going through the 5th Pantheon, weren't they? I just never noticed them. Ah, okay.
However, the Radiance appears to be the main god when it comes.
Hang on, what did you say about the Pale King?
The Radiance appears to be a creature made of essence, but she isn't the only higher being to give off essence. Un has green particles, the Pale King has gray particles.
To give off essence. Yes and no, I think. Yes and no, I think. We know from the 5th Pantheon that, or at least it's implied, I think, in the 5th Pantheon, through the Godseekers, monologue, dialogue, whatever you want to call it, upon reaching the, like, interim area where the White Lady is represented, so to say. We know that the White Lady is also a higher being, and I think we also know that from an inscription in Green Path, unless I'm mistaken, that she is a higher being as well, but she didn't give off any essence. So I don't think that it's fair to say that all higher beings give off essence. And in the case of the Pale King, the problem we have with the game is that the only location where we can interact or see or find any traces of the Pale King is the White Palace, and the White Palace isn't located in the physical realm of hollowness, but rather in the dream realm, as evidenced by the fact that Ghost has to use the dream nail on the corpse of that King's Mold? Was it the King's Mold? Of the King's Mold in order to access the White Palace. So the entirety of the White Palace was taken into the dream world. And that's why I figured there was essence there. Because you see that same essence also when we entered the dream realm in order to fight the dream bosses. Like, within the fight of the dream boss itself, no, there is no essence there. But until we actually get to the dream bosses, I think there is essence floating around in the air. I think. I could be wrong. I could be remembering this wrong.
And this sexy character named Grim gives off fiery red particles.
This sexy character.
However, the Radiance appears to be the main god when it comes to dreams, even if other gods also dabble in the dream realm. Getting back to the Moth tribe, it is their interaction with the Pale King that we need to discuss. Basically, the Moths turn their backs on the Radiance completely in order to worship the new light that had appeared, the Pale King's light. So yeah, Moths are assholes in this game too. With her...
I just noticed something. I'm sorry that I'm pausing so much. Maybe I'm a terrible reactor for pausing so much. I don't know. I just noticed something. Forgive me.
Getting back to the Moth tribe, it is their interaction with the Pale King that we need to discuss. Basically, the Moths turn their...
Oh, this is interesting. I never noticed this when I was there in the game. Although, to be fair, I was only there twice. The first time when I discovered the fountain, and then the second time when I returned in order to place the money it wanted, it demanded within it in order to get, what was it? A vessel fragment, I think, maybe? Maybe a mask or vessel fragment, one of the two. But I noticed just now that there are black tear tracks running down from the eyes. Like, it's interesting that all of the attendants, the royal attendants or nobles or whatever they were called, I don't remember anymore, that they also have those black tear tracks. But then you see that it's also in the statue. It's also in the statue. And this was in the ancient basin, which is right above the abyss. Interesting. Very interesting that the statue would also have that.
Backs on the Radiance completely in order to worship the new light that had appeared.
Actually, wait a minute. There's something else I just now noticed. I'm sorry that I'm so imprecise with the backward and forward. This too I never noticed. So I get the impression that the rest of Hollowness didn't really get to see the king all that much, the Pale King, and whatever depictions of the king there were throughout Hollowness were based essentially on the imagination of whoever had created the depiction. From the small king's idols to, I'm guessing, the statue here as well. So I don't know if this is of any importance or not. But we did mention previously that worms put bugs under their thrall. So they kind of hypnotize them, mesmerize them, however you want to describe it. And doesn't that actually look suspiciously like a flute that the statue might be holding in 4 hands? No one said that there were only 2 arms, you know. There could be 4. There could be 4. But it looks as if this statue is holding a flute of some sort. Now, of course, if this was a fountain, an active fountain, this might also simply be the pipe through which the water went for the fountain. I don't know. But I find this addition to the depiction quite interesting. Obviously, it's not quite accurate because the king in the statue here has a very spiky collar, which we know that the real Pale King didn't have. But this is interesting.
Had appeared, the Pale King's light.
I'm sorry, I'm theorizing even as I'm watching this lore video.
With her tribe forsaking her, the Radiance became a forgotten memory, a remnant of the past, and a thing that's definitely not going to come up again later in this video. And so the Pale King's new kingdom was established, Hallownest. But there is one aspect of Hallownest that we need to discuss. Unfortunately, to better understand this, we're going to have to read some poetry. In Wilds Beyond they speak your name with reverence and regret. For none could tame our savage souls, yet you the challenge met. Under palest watch you taught, we changed. Base instincts were redeemed. A world you gave to bug and beast as they had never dreamed.
Elegy of Hallownest, I think it was. What we were shown right at the very beginning of the playthrough, I think.
This is from a poem titled Elegy for Hallownest, written by Motomon the Teacher.
I need not have
paused. The poem appears
paused.
at the beginning of every playthrough, and hints at what the Pale King and his kingdom offered. Much of the land outside of Hallownest appears to be a wasteland, where bugs survive off of instinct, without the burden of mind. Hallownest somehow taught these bugs and tamed their savagery. Basically, the Pale King changed the instincts of his subjects and granted them higher thought. To get a better picture of this, let's look at two different characters, Boone and Tuck. These adorable
Who are they? I thought I'd met every single NPC. I thought I'd met every single NPC. Are you telling me I've missed 2 NPCs? Who are they? This looks like the junk pit.
panda bug things give us a clear display of Hallownest's effect. While both appear to be the same species of bug, Boone is dumb
Oh, Boone only appears in the comic then?
as a sack of rocks, struggling to string together words, while Tuck speaks fairly clearly. The main difference between these two characters is that while Boone lives outside of Hallownest, Tuck lives beneath the city's capital. Basically, it appears as though Hallownest is a literal holy ground that raises the intelligence of those who dwell within. The Pale King established a path, starting from the kingdom's entrance in King's Pass, winding through Greenpath and the fungal wastes, and finally ending at the massive capital at Hallownest's heart. We now know the capital city as the City of Tears, but that was likely not its original name.
No.
The rain that falls down onto the city from the blue lake above didn't begin until after the kingdom collapsed. So unless the capital was originally named by some edgy literature student, the name City of Tears wouldn't have made much sense. The king's motivation for all this appears to have been his desire to be worshipped. The citizens of Hallownest believe that the Pale King created the world, and everything in it. Shrines to the king can be found scattered throughout the kingdom, and king's idols were created and distributed to followers of the king. Despite the worship, the Pale King often kept himself hidden from his subjects, possibly to hide his blemishes. I mean, if you look at the size of the real Pale King to his statue in the ancient basin, the man is clearly overcompensating. The Pale King's White Palace was also built underneath the city, separating him from his subjects even more so. At the same time, certain powers...
Yes, I did find it quite interesting that the palace was located in the ancient basin. I mean, on the one hand, placing it in the ancient basin, and considering that honestly anything that's ancient generally is considered sacred or valued, something to be protected because, well, it's just important. I figured that might be a reason for for placing the palace there. But I did wonder why it was quite a ways away from the rest of Hallownest, with no easy access to it, more importantly. Outside of the stag station, of course.
Became shunned in Hallownest, though we don't know for sure if the Pale King had anything to do with this. Lifeblood is a blue liquidy substance that leaves those who drink it feeling refreshed. However, the use of lifeblood was seen as a taboo, and those who used it were demonized as heretics. The use of soul for combat was also shunned. Soul is a sort of life force.
How did you reach that conclusion? How? Like, I understand the lifeblood one. I think we can reach that conclusion thanks to the Hunter Journal entries. But why soul? Why would soul be shunned? Using soul. Why would that be shunned? Sorry, I'm supposed to be reacting and not theorizing myself.
Hollow Knight
interesting.
that animates the bodies of living creatures. But some characters are able to control the soul of others to conjure powerful spirits. But aside from a few exceptions, no citizens of Hallownest ever use this power.
I suppose it can be argued that the Soul Sanctum kind of hints towards working with soul being some kind of taboo. Because what went on in the Soul Sanctum is all sorts of wrong based on what I've managed to put together about it and about what the Soul Master was trying to achieve. Thanks to the dialogue after defeating the Soul Tyrant, his dream boss form. So I guess in a way, working with Soul was probably a I don't know. I don't know if I would call it shun necessarily.
However, the Pale King didn't rule alone. There was another higher being in the mix.
Yes, he had a queen.
A being known as the White Lady. The White Lady is a weird brute-like being that can be found in the modern-day Queen's Gardens. She is encased in a strange cocoon, and we know very little about her. With as much exposition...
Encased in a strange cocoon. See, I don't think it's a cocoon, to be honest, guys. I don't think it's a cocoon. I have no evidence to support what I'm about to say, but I don't think it's a cocoon based on the simple fact that the White Lady is a plant. Plants don't have cocoons. Bugs have cocoons. So I don't think that what envelops the White Lady is a cocoon. Rather, I think that what envelops her is something that she created in order to sort of essentially trap herself, restrain herself, to keep her there. So in a way, it's almost like she jailed herself, more or less, after retreating to the innermost sanctum of her estate, guarded by her loyal knight. And I think that she essentially limited herself to that location by binding herself to it as some peculiar form of penance, of regret for the actions that she'd done.
We get for the Pale King, there is next to nothing on the White Lady. But one thing we do know is that she likes to breed. Like, a lot. The White Lady would often retreat to the Queen's Gardens.
I have some thoughts about this one. Why would you say that she liked to breed? I don't really agree with that particular statement either. I don't agree with it. I don't agree with it. She's a plant. Plants, like, throw out a lot of seeds. Yes, that is true.
An area of land once controlled by the Mosskin.
Could have worded it better, I think. I don't fully agree with this one.
How exactly she walked around and actually went places is a lore question too deep for even my expertise. The White Lady is also known as a pale being, along with the Pale King. What exactly are pale beings? Well, we don't know for sure, but they seem to stand out even amongst higher beings as being even more powerful. I know that's a little confusing, so let's try using an example.
I just had a thought. When I was recording the highlights and thoughts video for after my Hollow Knight playthrough, I mentioned that there was one line in Mr. Mushroom's quest that confused me a lot when I was trying to put everything within the context of this game. And prior to finding out that pretty much the entire quest was just Easter eggs, there was a line about the moon. Let me see what that line was. I'm sorry. This reaction is going to end up being incredibly long. What was it? No, this was the locations. The text. No sight of her. Right, so there was a line about losing sight of her, but Mr. Mushroom reassured whoever he was speaking to that they would eventually remember, and to trust the moon, themselves, or her. Now I wondered at that point what the moon might refer to, because we don't have the moon anywhere in this game. Anywhere. There's nothing even vaguely moon related present in it, but it just occurred to me now. What if pale beings have a connection to the moon? I have nothing to support this, of course. But it is an interesting thought that would have allowed my theory that I put together during Mr. Mushroom's quest to fit in even like slightly more than what I managed. I'm sorry, it just occurred to me. I'm sorry, this is a bad reaction video. I'm sorry.
I'd say that regular higher beings are like a TP-Link Archer C7 AC1750 wireless dual band gigabit router, while pale beings are like the Asus RT-AX88U AX6000 dual band 8X gigabit Wi-Fi router. Under the Pale King, Halnest underwent a bit of an industrial revolution. He ordered the construction of the stagways, which were used to transport passengers and goods. The Forgotten Crossroads and the storerooms above the City of Tears were used to store goods that traveled along these stagways. The king also ordered the construction of the tramways, because literally no one is safe from the threat of automation. A tram was built between the Forgotten Crossroads and the resting grounds. A second tram was built from the kingdom's edge across the ancient basin over to Deep Nest. And then a third tram was started in Deep Nest and attempted to go further into Deep Nest. Not sure how useful that would have been to the bugs of Hallownest, but whatever. The Pale King's a smart guy. I'm not gonna question him. But anyway, the Pale King's super smart plan to build a tram in Deep Nest ended up getting a few of his tram workers killed. The bugs of Deep Nest rejected the Pale King's attempt to build a tram in their territory, further cementing the poor relationship.
I'm sorry that I keep pausing so much, but it just occurred to me that the descent into the ancient basin from what was right above the ancient basin? Like, to the one side there were the royal waterways, and then to the right was Isma's Grove, and then what was above them I don't remember anymore, but there was this like shaft with a lot of like these type of platforms with these wooden, I don't know what you would call them, planks maybe, connecting them, but not really planks. But that was a very peculiar construction. Like, I didn't like it mostly because there were also a lot of spikes present there, and in that sense, like, you would think that it was created as a sort of deterrent in order to prevent anyone from actually reaching the ancient grounds. But I did wonder about it, and seeing this just now also made me think about it. Of course, this is not that shaft. This is the area right in front of the entrance to the mask maker's workshop.
Shared between the two groups.
In Deep Nest.
Aside from convenient fast travel, regular pathways were also used to cart goods around the kingdom. From this was born probably one of the most important groups in Hallownest, and perhaps even all of fiction. An elusive guild of bugs, simply known as the Menderbugs.
I know about the existence of Menderbugs. And I did try to break the sign, ascend up to Dirtmouth, and then descend using Desolate Dive, or what was it, Descending Darkness. I did try to do that in order to catch sight of a Menderbug, but alas, no success.
Took to maintaining the various signs scattered throughout Hallownest. From the journal entry of one Menderbug, we can catch a journal entry into their ancient and unknowable minds.
What? Where?
Dear, dear diary, isn't life just the most beautiful thing?
Oh.
Fixing signs, mending posts, let them break, I say. I'm a better mender for all that repairing. I sometimes doubt there's a single bug in all of Hallownest happier than me.
Is that an actual thing? Is that an actual thing? Have I missed something? And here I'm like, I thought I'd actually discovered and explored everything in Hallownest, but no, I've already missed an NPC character in the form of Tuck. And apparently there is an office of sorts, I guess, belonging to a Menderbug, and a Menderbug journal entry. Is that the actual entry read in an appropriate voice? Or is this, I don't know. Is this real, guys? Is this real? Please tell me in the comments below.
Another example of the Pale King's expanding infrastructure is the Crystal Peak, This area is filled with crystals that grow rapidly along walls, ceilings, and even the shells of certain bugs. These crystals were considered valuable to the bugs of Hallownest, resulting in large-scale mining efforts. We don't actually see the crystals used anywhere else in Hallownest, but they are said to contain a sort of energy. The crystals are also said to sing, if you listen very carefully. In terms of military, Hallownest's first line of defense appeared to be a group simply known as the Five Great Knights. The members of this esteemed coalition were Ogrim, Hagamol, Zamir, Drya, and Isma. For being so important, most of the information about these knights has been lost to time. Ogrim is the knight we know the most about, since he is one of the few knights still alive during the events of the game. Ogrim expressed a great amount of loyalty towards the king, and he maybe had something going on with Isma, but we really don't know. Hagamol was known for his sense of humor and his soft-spoken voice, but at the same time, he was also dummy thick. Mysterious Zamir arrived in Hallownest from a serene land, bringing with her a collection of delicate flowers. At some point, she also got into a relationship with a mantis, but not just any mantis, a daughter of one of the mantis lords. So yeah, it seems like these great knights were slaying in more ways than one.
Can I just say that I love this version of the music? I love this piano version of the music.
All we really know about Drya is that she was fierce, caring, and wise. As for Isma, she was described as being kind. She also appears to be some sort of weird plant life form, but there's no information on where she's from or what her powers were.
Yeah, we don't actually know a lot about Isma, which I found very interesting. I mean, we know at least a little bit about each of the knights, but about Isma we can only really kind of deduce that she had something to do with plants. Now obviously, it's clearly not impossible for a plant being to exist, considering the White Lady, and maybe, I don't know, maybe she was part fungi? Maybe she was part fungi? I don't know.
The Five Great Knights play an important role in the Champion's Call, the Knotted Grove, and the Battle of the Black Worm. We have no idea what these events were or how they affected Hallownest, but they sound cool nonetheless.
They do.
During Hallownest's reign, there was another strange area that seemed to exist separate from the Pale King's rule. Carved out of the corpse of an ancient bug, an area called the Colosseum of Fools was constructed, and it was a destination for warriors from outside Hallownest. The sole purpose for fighting in the Colosseum appeared to be simply for glory, with a mysterious figure known as the Lord Fool overseeing the combat. We don't know when the Colosseum was constructed or if the Pale King was involved, but one of his servants, the Pale Lurker, became a champion in the Colosseum, perhaps indicating the Pale King's approval. And finally, there was the Royal Waterways, where the fecal excrement of the kingdom was washed out into the fungal wastes. This area saw the rise of a species of parasite-like creatures called the flukes. The flukes spawned from the fluke marm, a giant monster with cavities in which tinier flukes live. There really isn't too much lore involved with the flukes, but I do need to point out that the fluke marm is canonically a MILF. Like, that's not even debatable. The sky is blue, 2 + 2 = 4, and we all want to fuck this thing. And so this was the kingdom of Hallownest at its height. Hallownest was a vast kingdom connected by a network of stagways and tram stations.
No comments.
The bugs of Hallownest mourned their dead on the resting grounds, engaged in commerce using Geo, the de facto currency of the region, and a thriving capital located in the middle of the kingdom. The Pale King had succeeded in crafting a full-blown society, but we all know there are pitfalls to living in a society. As a suspiciously knowledgeable hunter points out in his journal, the Pale King had created a population of weak and pathetic creatures. The bugs of Hallownest did not hunt for their own food, and had become complacent with their comfort. This is even more obvious with the east wing of the capital. These greedy members of Hallownest's high society became complete cowards, obsessed with riches and plum from excess wealth. The bugs living in Hallownest Prime looked quite different than the instinctive simpletons they once were. Their savagery had been replaced with intelligence, and through that intellect, they gave the Pale King the devotion and service he desired. and while there were a few snags along the way, they were shining times for the king and his subjects. Resting at the threshold of Hallownest is a strange lore tablet, proclaiming Hallownest to be the last and only civilization. It calls Hallownest an eternal kingdom. This appears to have been the Pale King's goal, for Hallownest to stand against a wasted world as a final beacon for civilization. And that was the Pale King's ultimate folly, to think that he could succeed where so many others had failed before.
He's painting the Pale King in a rather positive light, I have to say. Not one I don't know. Like, I was quite upset by the discovery of what, what was in the abyss. And pretty much just from there on, the unraveling of what the Pale King had actually done. So I don't have any particularly kind feelings towards the Pale King. But I guess I can't deny that he did create something impressive, at least.
Long before the Pale Kings or the Barry Bensons of the world, the land of Hallownest was controlled by an ancient caste. Hints of Hallownest's history are littered throughout the land, with the most notable examples being the soul totems and arcane eggs. One sect of these ancient bugs didn't worship a god like the Pale King or any lord, but instead a dark and mysterious substance known as the Void. This ancient caste once also tried to lay claim to the entire land of Hallownest, but they too failed. In his quest to conquer all of Hallownest, the Pale King had made an enemy.
I have to ask, how did you reach that conclusion? That the civilization that existed prior to the existence of Hallownest, aka the civilization which not necessarily worshipped but honored, I suppose, the Void, wanted to conquer or what was it that you said? To conquer?
The Pale King or any lord, but instead a dark and mysterious substance known as the Void.
Mm-hmm.
This ancient caste once also tried to lay claim to the entire land of Hallownest.
Right, to lay claim to the entire land of Hallownest. How did you reach that conclusion? I've not seen anything to support that. Literally. I mean, yes, we've got... No, what is your evidence for this? I dislike that he isn't giving evidence for these claims. I dislike that. I mentioned at the very beginning that I like having a nice line of reasoning that you can follow and you can see how the lore seeker has reached the conclusion that they did. I am not seeing this here, and it's irritating me.
But they too failed. In his quest to conquer all of Hallownest, the Pale King had made an enemy long forgotten, an enemy that was about to be remembered. I mentioned earlier that the Moth tribe entirely forgot about the Radiance in order to worship the Pale King, but that isn't quite true. Memories of her still lingered, and hushed whispers of faith kept the Radiance alive. At the summit of the Crystal Peak, a location known as Hallownest Crown, a strange collection of glyphs can be found. Joining these glyphs is a statue of the Radiance, presiding over the kingdom below. This old summit is the sole standing shrine left to the Radiance. This was built in order to keep the memory of the Radiance alive. The Radiance's light began to appear in the dreams of Hallownest citizens. This light manifested itself in an infection that ravaged through the kingdom's tunnels. Those infected would fall into a deep sleep and awaken with broken minds. Some of the lesser bugs tried to resist the Radiance's light, which only resulted in them being consumed by it even more so. Many infected bugs lost their wills and began attacking bugs that weren't infected. The infection also twisted the bodies of its hosts, causing them to bloat and occasionally develop orange cysts on their bodies. For many victims, they were reverted back to their basic instincts, carrying out the duties they once fulfilled in life, but now as mindless slaves. Those caught up in the infection were linked into the Radiance's hive mind, allowing her to control their bodies if needed.
As
the infection
implied.
spread across Hallownest, many groups looked to solutions to fight off the Radiance's light. The gates to the City of Tears were closed in an attempt to keep the infection from reaching the city.
That makes sense. I never actually considered why the gates were closed. I never considered that. But it makes sense. It makes sense. But it also doesn't. But it does. But it doesn't. Interesting. Also, can I just say that I really love all of these piano versions of the music.
The stagways were also shut down at some point, and many of the stags eventually died out. But some took more proactive efforts against the infection. The scholars of the Soul Sanctum decided to harness the power of soul in an attempt to fight the infection. This resulted in the deaths of hundreds of bugs, whose souls were sucked out and injected into the bodies of the scholars. Their goal was to achieve some kind of pure focus, which would somehow protect them from plagues of the mind. The scholars' leader, the Soul Master, was driven mad by the sheer power of soul, and his entire sect failed to avoid infection. But hey, at least they took as many innocent people down with them as they could. The Mantis tribe, showing a stronger will than the common bug, were able to stave off the infection.
Willpower seems to
However,
be the key.
one of the 4 Mantis Lords turned against his sisters.
Embraced it.
He and his followers took in the infection willingly, as it gave them more strength and courage. At some point during all this, the Traitor Lord and his followers were exiled from the Mantis village, eventually taking up residence in the Queen.
I never noticed before, but are those actually tents? Are those actually tents? I never noticed that.
The Traitor Lord's daughter ended up dying at some point. This is the same Mantis that was in a relationship with Zamir, one of the 5 Great Knights. But the Mantises rejected their union because of Zamir's outsideness. As a gamer, this type of prejudice is all too familiar, and honestly, it makes me sick. With the 5 Great Knights completely useless to fight against the infection, the Pale King devised his own scheme. A scheme involving a strange substance known as Void. As I mentioned earlier, the Pale King's White Palace was built in an area called the Ancient Basin, but his castle wasn't the only noteworthy thing down there. At the bottom of the Ancient Basin was the entrance to a pit, known as the Abyss. Within the Abyss was a lake composed of void. The Pale King realized that this void could be given form, as evidenced by an imprint of such, deep within the Abyss.
I remember finding that particular imprint, and I think I tried to hit it with the dream nail and it didn't give me anything. Anything of note, of significance. But now that I look at it again, are those the void tendrils? Or void tendril beings?
Possibly left there by the ancient civilization that predated Hallownest. The Pale King devised a workshop in his palace, where he placed void in armor shells imbued with soul, creating servants known as King's Molds and Wing Molds. These void creatures were somehow imprinted with the desire of the Pale King, so that they would serve him. It isn't clear when the Pale King started making these creatures. There is evidence to imply that even common bugs were aware of King's Molds, but the point is, the Pale King turned to the void in order to create another creature, one that he believed could contain the Radiance and her infection. He tried to create a pure vessel. The Radiance's infection needs its host to have a will and a mind in order to enslave it. A pure vessel would be a creature made of void designed to lack those features. The Pale King believed that by harnessing the void inside a pure vessel, he would be able to stop the infection and keep Hallownest lasting eternal. But his method for creating this so-called pure vessel was incredibly cruel. This is where the White Lady and her King Kong-sized libido come into play. These 2 higher beings engaged in a union of some kind, resulting in the creation of several eggs that were dropped down into the abyss.
Several eggs? Oh, you mean that... interesting. Okay, wait. Are you implying that the big round thing is the egg out of which all of the others hatched? Like a sort of seed. There are actually roots going outside of it into the wall, aren't there? Okay, fine. Continue.
The void seeped into these eggs, corrupting the offspring of the Pale King and the White Lady.
Hollowing them out.
This act resulted in the creation of the vessels. The vessels are not technically considered to be alive. They are shells created from the Pale King and White Lady that have been filled with the void. Within each vessel is a shade, a completely void being hidden behind the face of the vessel. Vessels are also non-gendered, I guess because they're dead or something. I'm not sure if that's how that works, but whatever. I'm not an expert on these kinds of things. I don't work at ICE anymore. Thousands of vessels were created during this process, but only one was chosen as the pure vessel. This particular vessel, chosen by the Pale King, was deemed the Hollow Knight, and was taken away to the White Palace. But I want to take a bit of a closer look at this part of the story. There are a number of questions and theories surrounding this moment that I really want to dig into. The big question surrounding this moment is, why was the Hollow Knight chosen over any other vessel? One common theory is that the Pale King took these vessels back to the White Palace and evaluated them using his giant collection of buzzsaws. This theory is probably the least likely explanation.
Yeah, I don't agree with that one.
It kinda exists just to explain the buzzsaws, which is quite the mystery, I'll admit, but doesn't really mesh with the vessel.
Can I just say that I love this, like, I don't know, expanded shot of all of these buzzsaws that very nicely shows the Pale King's obsession with buzzsaws.
Vessels very well. How does being good at Super Meat Boy prove that you are a worthy vessel? And while thinking about logistics in a game about magic bugs is never a good idea, how exactly did the Pale King transfer these thousands of vessels to his palace without characters like the Dung Defender finding out? So this means that the Pale King probably made his decision without taking any of the vessels out of the abyss. So how did the Pale King make his evaluation? I think the best explanation comes from a theory I originally heard from a user named Golden Flower Fan.
Can I just say that I like that he is giving credit where credit is due and not claiming this theory as purely his own, or that it wasn't inspired by someone else's theory. I mean, obviously a lore seeker can reach the same conclusion as someone else on their own, but it's nice that he's like, he mentions this user.
Basically, the vessels were hatched down at the bottom of the abyss.
Yes.
And the first one to make it to the top was chosen by the Pale King.
Is that not... Okay, so it kind of seemed... Okay. I keep forgetting... Yeah, okay. So it seemed kind of very obvious to me that that was the criterion, basically. That was the criterion that the Pale King had. That the one offspring that managed to make it through the entire ascent is the one that can contain the Radiance.
In a memory of this event, we see vessels falling from above back down into the pit of the abyss. Perhaps these vessels weren't being cast down into the abyss, but fell while trying to escape out of it.
It seemed
the lore tablet outside the abyss appears to support this theory. It reads, "Our pure vessel has ascended. Beyond lies only the refuse and regret of its creation. We shall enter that place no longer."
And
this
so
tablet
was
was likely written right after the Hollow Knight was chosen, considering that is when the entrance to the abyss was sealed off. The tablet proclaims that the pure vessel has ascended, or in other words, climbed out of the abyss. And while cut content should never be considered canon, I would just like to point out that an earlier version of this tablet, found in the game's code, was even more explicit about this.
Oh?
It read, "From below, our pure vessel has ascended." But how does making it to the top of the abyss first prove that the Hollow Knight is somehow a perfectly hollow vessel?
Determination.
Well, I think this whole concept might just be a misconception. What if the Hollow Knight wasn't any different from the other vessels? All the vessels were made in the exact same way after all. The idea that the Hollow Knight was somehow more hollow than the other vessels comes from the fact that there were so many vessels created in the first place. If they only needed one, then why create so goddamn many? I mean, this is like Octomom on steroids. Well, these are bugs we're talking about, so it would make sense that multiple offspring would come from one egg. And it might have been a precaution to produce multiple vessels in hopes that at least one would be able to successfully escape the abyss. Now another explanation could be that the Pale King just yeeted other vessels that made it to the top first, after determining that they weren't hollow, which would better explain why so many were created. Ultimately, the exact details aren't super important, but I do find it interesting how many different interpretations can be pulled from this part of the lore.
I have to admit that it never occurred to me that there might be a different criterion than the one that I kind of figured was the criterion. It never occurred to me that there might be something different. I don't think that the Pale King was throwing other vessels, potential candidates down after they reached the top. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Then we have very little evidence to, I don't know, to firmly cement one possibility as the main one, the only one. But it never occurred to me that there might be other possibilities.
After the Hollow Knight was chosen, the Pale King sealed the doorway to the abyss, leaving the discarded vessels to rot away in darkness. These actions were not taken lightly by the Pale King or the White Lady. Both participants expressed shame in what they did, but saw no other option to save the kingdom. But the vessels weren't the only poor saps sealed away in the abyss. There's also a lighthouse that was built on top of a naturally formed spire, its light shining down on an ocean of abyss below. Inside was one of the Pale King's royal retainers, who was left in charge of keeping the lighthouse turned on. So this brave soul was willingly sealed in a dark and dangerous tomb for the rest.
I noticed just now that this figure also has black tear tracks from it running down from its eyes. Yeah, I'm starting to think that that is a sign of prolonged contact with the abyss, actually.
Of his life, just so he could not pull a lever. Well, at least he was living with purpose. With the abyss sealed and the Hollow Knight chosen, the Pale King's plan was beginning to come together. The Hollow Knight was raised and trained to prime form, causing it to grow several times its original size. We don't know exactly why this happened, but I guess the Hollow Knight is just a grower and not a shower. We know that the Hollow Knight was—
I actually have a theory about that. Because regardless of the Hollow Knight having been hollowed out by the void and being a void, that doesn't change the fact that originally, the Hollow Knight's parentage consists of the Pale King and the White Lady. The White Lady being a plant. The abyss is a very dark place, whereas the Pale King's palace and his very presence, which apparently gives off, I don't remember what kind of light was mentioned at the beginning of the video, but he does give off a certain light. And plants don't grow in the dark, they grow in the light. If the Hollow Knight, the future pure vessel, was taken into the White Palace to be trained there, which I dare say might be the case, specifically by using the Path of Pain obstacle course, it's no surprise then that the Hollow Knight would grow the way that, well, it has grown.
Was trained to use a nail, but why was this even necessary? One possible explanation is that the Hollow Knight needed to protect itself in case an intruder tried to kill it. You know,
that doesn't make
like
sense.
The player.
That doesn't make sense.
Perhaps this was important in the process of containing the radiance. Unfortunately, the details of that are never fully explained. The Hollow Knight might have...
Although it does also at the same time make sense, because... But it doesn't. But it does, but it doesn't. Okay, never mind what I said. It sort of makes sense, but it also doesn't make sense. Because if the idea was to seal the radiance, within the Hollow Knight, then the idea was that this would be an eternal seal. The only reason that there was a backup plan, aka Ghost and any other vessels that were not the chosen vessel, the initial chosen vessel, the only reason that existed was the possibility that maybe the seal wouldn't hold. So it doesn't make sense for the Hollow Knight to have been given a nail with which to protect itself within the temple, or to have been trained in the nail arts in the first place. Although I would imagine that, considering that the mantises managed to resist the infection through sheer willpower, I would imagine that if a being had a great sense of discipline, of a great sense of internal discipline, which could come about through, sword training or nail training, that would make sense.
Somehow focus the radiance inside itself, but Team Cherry gives us no explanation of how that might have worked.
Speculation.
But that still wasn't
only
enough for the Pale King. Additional seals were needed in order to protect the Hollow Knight's physical body while the radiance was trapped inside of it. To achieve this, the Pale King sought the help of 3 particular bugs, who would later be known as the Dreamers: Lurien the Watcher, Motomon the Teacher, and Hera the Beast. Lurien is definitely the most mysterious of the 3 Dreamers. He lived in the Watcher's Spire in the City of Tears. From there, Lurien watched over the city with his telescope. Lurien was a pretty big fan of the king, so it probably took little convincing for him to lie down
Absolutely.
for him. Lurien might also be tied to another strange incident that occurred in the City of Tears. Hidden on some of Lurien's lore tablets are images of jars, the same jars that can be found stockpiled in the Tower of Love. This building sits on the outskirts of the city, and is the setting of one of the most bizarre bosses in the game, the Collector. The Collector is a void construct that appears to have been made from the same mold used to create the King's molds. But the Collector is unique because, well, Good grief, he's naked! The Collector stayed in the Tower of Love with a noble bug who likely owned the establishment.
The Collector, being a creature of void, and associated with void, and the key to whose tower was given to this bug here, who also has black tear tracks running down its face from its eyes.
In the
coming
tower,
together nicely, isn't it?
A number of bugs can be found captured in jars, implying that these 2 were tasked with collecting these creatures. However, the Collector somehow became obsessed with grubs.
See, I disagree. I rather disagree. I need to look at that tablet again. I'm sorry that I'm going back 23. I would call that guesswork, honestly.
Stockpiled in the tower.
More guesswork than anything else. That could be a jar, but I don't think it is. Because there's literally nothing else connecting Lurien to the Collector in any way, shape, or form, and there's no reason for Lurien to have a connection to the Collector. None whatsoever.
Tower of Love. This building sits on the outskirts of the city, and is the bug staying. The Collector stayed in the Tower of Love with a noble bug who likely owned the establishment. In the tower, a number of bugs can be found captured in jars, implying that these 2 were tasked with collecting these creatures. However, the Collector somehow became obsessed with grubs, creating a map to keep track of grubs it captured in jars, as well as keeping a strange shrine displaying a grub.
Ah yes, the grub schematic. The grub schematic. Something which I am deeply, immensely curious about and which I have no information about. There is none. There is none.
In the style of the Vitruvian Man.
Kind
Eventually,
of, yeah.
the bug staying with the collector decided to lock it inside the Tower of Love and fled to the Queen's Gardens, where it died, likely due to overexposure to the void.
Ah.
Despite being locked up in the tower, the collector is still spotted by the hunter at some point, which either means this only happened recently, or the hunter has been farting around in Hallownest for a long-ass time. We have no idea what these creatures were trying to do. It's implied that the collector was trying to preserve the creatures of Hallownest, perhaps trying to protect them from the spread of the infection, but we don't know where the collector's obsession with grubs originated, and while Lurian does seem connected to all of this, we don't know how involved he was with this operation, or what its end goal exactly was. Moldamon the teacher lived in the teacher's archives, a library built atop a lake of acid in the Fog Canyon. The lower half of her body consists of tentacles, making her a popular subject for the thriving Hollow Knight R34 community. The archives and the Fog Canyon as a whole are also filled with these strange Metroid knockoffs.
I'm pausing this briefly. Sorry, I just want to go and get a little bit more water. So be right back. Right, so I'm back, and yeah, let's just hit play.
These creatures are likely related to Monomon in some way. They could be her live offspring, her test tube babies, or possibly even her shit. Motomon uses futuristic cathode ray tube things to store information about Hallownest. Several terminals in the teacher's archive go into detail about the Pale King's plan to defeat the Radiants, indicating that Motomon had intimate knowledge of.
I never noticed that those were actually symbols in those tubes. I figured it was just water bubbling upwards, you know? I didn't think that was actually writing. So they're kind of like computers, actually. Interesting.
What she was taking part in. Finally, the Pale King sought the help of Hera the Beast, the Queen of Deepnest. Now, as I mentioned earlier, relations between Hallownest and Deepnest were kinda not great.
Not great.
Unlike the other two dreamers, Hera needed to be convinced in order to help the Pale King. Hera would eventually agree to become a dreamer, in exchange for a child. The Pale King agreed, and the two engaged in a dalliance, which is a fancy way of saying they totally boned. The White Lady was okay with this arrangement. In fact, she might have been watching from the closet. The motive behind Hera's request is never elaborated on, but it appears as though the King of Deepnest was dead at this point. Hera was a common bug, so perhaps she desired.
I do wonder about the king, I have to admit. I do wonder about that. Because there wasn't really ever any indication that there had been ever a king in Deepnest. Like, logically, maybe there should be, but I don't think that there actually was.
The Pale King's pale seed, so that her child could be of high birth. The bargain between Hera and the Pale King resulted in the birth of Hornet. She became known as the gendered child, because unlike the Pale King's other children, Hornet was not hollowed out by the Abyss. Hera and Hornet spent little time together, as Hera had to make good on her end of the bargain. And so the three dreamers were put to rest. Through their actions, a seal was placed over the black egg, prohibiting entrance into the chamber. These dreamers also had their own protection. At the base of Lurian's spire,
I just had a thought. The name is the Temple of the Black Egg. What kind of egg is that? What kind of egg is that? Because it is like the egg that we find in the Abyss, and that we hid in order to get that cutscene of the ascent from the Abyss, was not all that big. It was not all that big. Like, it was maybe twice a ghost's height at most. The Temple of the Black Egg is quite sizable, and the black egg specifically is quite sizable. Whose egg is that? Whose egg is that? Because that must have been a massive, massive, massive creature to be birthed from that egg. Actually, the only other massive creature that we know of in Hollow Nest, because when I said massive creature, I had to think of the worms, of the Pale King's shell, over in Kingdom's Edge, the decomposing shell, slowly disintegrating shell, which is quite sizable. Now, I don't know how worms grow and what size they are when they are born, but I would imagine that considering they end up quite sizable, that the eggs from which they hatch are equally as sizable. And there was a mention in the White Defender, I think it was the White Defenders, yes, the White Defenders Hunter Journal entry, there was a mention of the Battle of the Black Worm, which is a very specific word to use there. So we have worm again, so definitely a rival to the Pale King, who used to be a worm. And there is the word black in front of it. Presumably, the black worm's territory used to actually be some part of Hollow Nest. If the 5 Great Knights participated in that battle. And in order for them to participate in that battle, the Pale King must have established some part of Hollow Nest already. But there must have been a reason for that battle to happen. And I would imagine that conquering another worm's territory would actually be, like, it doesn't sound like too much of a stretch. And that worm may have actually hatched in Hollow Nest, or at least above it. And the egg it hatched from might be what eventually became the Temple of the Black Egg. I'm sorry, this is a terrible reaction video. I'm sorry, I'm supposed to be reacting to this video and not theorizing myself. I'm sorry, I can't help it.
The guarded access to their master's body. Motomon's body was protected by a giant jellyfish named Umu. On top of this, Motomon entrusted her servant Quirrell with a mask which would be required to break an additional seal she had placed over herself. So she basically is double wrapped.
That's an interesting interpretation. That's a very interesting interpretation. When Quirrell's mask dissolved and went into the tank, because prior to the mask dissolving, I'm sorry, I went too far back.
Access to their master's body. Motomon's body was protected by a giant jellyfish named Umu.
Yes,
On top of this,
the only thing we see here of Monomon are her... jellyfish don't really have tentacles, do they? What do they have? Feelers? They don't have feelers. What do they have? Limbs. I'm going to call them limbs. I don't know what the things of jellyfish are called. But we can only see Monomon's limbs here, actually. And everything else is... I don't know, let me see the animation again.
Motomon entrusted her servant Quirrell with a mask which would be required to break an additional seal she had placed over herself. So she basically...
Interesting. See, I always thought that she had actually given him her own mask. I'd always thought that she had actually given him her own mask. Actually. Not that it was a seal of some sort. That does make more sense, actually.
Is double wrapping herself.
Okay.
As for Hera, we're not really sure what protected her, since this
I'm sorry. I just, like, when I came to this room in Deep Nest, in the Weaver's Den, was it the Weaver's Den? The Beast's Den, sorry, in the Beast's Den, I found it quite odd because I couldn't really do anything with it. I could sort of, kind of, maybe climb it a little bit, but not entirely. And I couldn't strike it or anything. But it's a very peculiar decoration, to say the least, for any kind of chamber. Especially because it doesn't feel that it should work the way that it does. It shouldn't. I mean, yes, you can think that it's suspended from the ceiling by those ropes or whatever you want to call them, but if you look at the point of the item, it's not actually attached to the ceiling. So it's not actually being supported by the ropes, which implies that it's kind of floating, actually, above the bed. Which makes me once again wonder, what kind of device is this? Because it's also shaped in a very peculiar way. It's shaped in a very peculiar way. The bottom part of it looks very much like a shell, like a mask. With two eyes and a mouth, essentially, I guess you could call it. And right on top, or right above it, there is what I would interpret to be a crown. Could this actually be a depiction of the King of Deep Nest, the deceased, or absent at least, King of Deep Nest? And why is it floating? I'm sorry. This is a terrible reaction video.
We don't know where this creature is hiding, but whoever it is, they really suck at their job. Now there appears to be one more element to the Pale King's plan, involving the Weavers. Hidden away in the Weaver's Den is an incomplete seal of binding, woven from silk.
Which I wondered
This design
about.
prominently features the Hollow Knight's head, and can be found in the White Palace, as well as blocking the exit during the Hollow Knight.
Would we describe it as the Hollow Knight's head?
The Weaver's Den is an
This one has
incomplete
2
seal
points.
of binding, woven from silk. This design prominently features the Hollow Knight's head, and can
Okay, I suppose we can call it the Hollow Knight's head.
be found in the White Palace, as well as
Sorry.
blocking the
Sorry
exit
for
during
pausing.
the Hollow Knight fight. Silk spools created by the Weavers can be found in the Stag Station in Deep Nest, as well as the Stag Station next to the White Palace. These spools can also be found in the Pale King's workshop. We know that the Weavers were closely tied to Hera and Hornet, so their actions might have been a part of the deal between the Pale King and Hera. Once the Hollow Knight was ready, the Radiance was somehow channeled into the vessel, which was then placed inside of a giant black egg located in the Forgotten Crossroads. This egg was built to sustain the Hollow Knight, and itself appears to be...
You know, that's something I never actually gave much thought to. I mean, yes, that the Hollow Knight or Pure Vessel becomes the vessel of the Radiance, sealing her within it. Yes, but how did they actually get the Radiance inside in the first place? She is a being of dream, incorporeal. So it's not as if they could place her within the egg, like within the Temple of the Black Egg, and then, you know, I don't know, somehow seal her within the Hollow Knight by having his void aspect consume her or something like that. That doesn't seem particularly feasible as a method. So how did they actually trap the Radiance within the Hollow Knight? We have no answers to this question, I think.
fashioned
That
from
it's an
void.
interesting question.
The Hollow Knight was chained up, and the entrance to the Black Egg was locked behind a powerful seal created by the Three Dreamers. Initially, this convoluted plan actually worked, and the infection was successfully contained. Memorials to the Hollow Knight and the Dreamers were erected in the City of Tears and the Resting Grounds. But this is the part of the story where things get a little bit hazy. By the time these statues were constructed, citizens had taken to writing on parchment woven from spider silk, which was all destroyed when water started pouring down onto the city. We don't know how long the Hollow Knight was able to completely contain the infection. Bugs from Dirtmouth used to go to the Temple of the Black Egg to pray, saying they felt at peace within the walls. But after a while, they stopped going, perhaps indicating that the infection.
When do we find that out? Is it that very first interaction with Quirrell? Because I do remember that the first encounter with Quirrell was within the Temple of the Black Egg, but I don't actually remember the conversation itself anymore. I'd have to rewatch it.
The infectious air continued to seep through Hallownest for years, eventually even reaching the deepest parts of the kingdom. As it turns out, the Pale King's pure vessel wasn't quite so pure after all. The Hollow Knight had been tarnished by an idea instilled. While the game never explicitly tells us what that idea was, it does hint strongly at what it might be. Hidden away in the White Palace is a memory showing the Hollow Knight and the Pale King sharing a moment. The Hollow Knight might have developed a parental bond to the Pale King, and who could blame it? The Pale King is a pretty great dad after all. You know, if you ignore the infanticide and everything. Remember those smug mushroom dickheads? Well, it turns out their trust in the Pale King was a complete mistake. That shared mind isn't looking too good now, is it? In the fungal core, the corpse of a giant mushroom lies dormant. Its final thoughts were, "Pale worm, what good to see a demise unavoidable?"
See? What good to foresee a demise unavoidable? And I think that Queen Vespa actually also mentioned something along that line. But I remembered correctly. This
could imply that the Pale King always knew that his kingdom was doomed. All he could do was delay the inevitable. This is likely the moment when Hallownest, as it once was, entirely collapsed. The Hollow Knight had not completely stopped the infection, and while it may have taken a while, Hallownest was eventually brought low. It's at this point that characters and areas begin to resemble as we know them in-game. When it became clear that the Hollow Knight was not able to contain the Radiance, the Pale King resorted to his final plan.
Plan B.
He fucked off, hiding himself, his White Palace, and his Pale Court in the Dream World.
Yeah, he pretty much just ran away.
At this point, all of the furniture in the palace was covered under white sheets, similar to how people in the real world cover their furniture while away on long trips. The palace was also completely covered with thorns and buzzsaws.
Never considered
similar
that.
To how people in the real world cover their houses with thorns and buzzsaws.
Yeah.
The Pale King would eventually pass away while sitting on his throne in the White Palace. There's no confirmation on what killed him, but there are a few things to consider. The throne room is incredibly dark compared to.
He doesn't give off essence. It's the area around him that gives off essence because the White Palace is in the Dream Realm. So I don't think that higher beings by default are beings of dream that give off essence
to the rest of the palace. And the particle effects and ambient track in this room are identical to that of the Abyss.
Are they?
All of the king's molds surrounding the Pale King are dead. The ancient basin itself also has become stained with the presence of void, as it can be seen as high as the rundown elevator shaft leading back to the city. Remember that bug that was sealed away in the Abyss to make sure the lighthouse wasn't turned off? Well, the lighthouse was turned off. I guess that whole living with purpose thing is a crock of shit after all. It seems as though the Sea of Void
Those are soul jars. I wondered about that. I wondered about it. I don't know. I think I mused about this maybe during my highlights and thoughts video. I don't remember anymore actually. But I did wonder for a moment if there were soul jars in the lighthouse. Or maybe no, I didn't. It wasn't in the video. It was in the comments. I think. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know. I do remember, I don't know. I remember replying to a comment somewhere, and it was about the lighthouse. And I said I would have to check if there were soul jars there or not, like in the soul sanctum. I don't remember anymore why I said I would do that though. Oh, the curse of stress, or one of the curses anyway, is terrible short-term memory. Or terrible memory in general.
Itself actually convinced this bug to betray his king and turn off the lighthouse. Now I know what you're thinking. Exactly how conscious is the Void? Is the Void able to think for itself? Can it form strategies? Does it host a podcast? Well, according to this Chozo statue ripoff, the Void is powerful, but not unified. So while it can thrash around at things that come near it, or call out in unison to turn off a light, it's not a single conscious being. Getting back to the Pale King, one could argue that the Void might have played a role in his ultimate demise, and I've argued that viewpoint in the past, but we have to remember that there isn't enough evidence to know for sure. As an expert lawyer and a good friend of mine, Johnny Cochran, once said, "Any evidence that the Void was involved in the Pale King's death is circumstantial. My name is Johnny Cochran." Just above the White Palace, the bugs in the City of Tears weren't faring much better. Even if we ignore the fact that the infection was still around, there were other issues that helped lead to the city's downfall. Due to the gates being sealed, some bugs resorted to cannibalism in order to avoid.
I thought that might be the case, but I kind of wanted to think otherwise when I came across this particular room.
Starvation. And there's also that metric fuckton of corpses lining the walls of the Soul Sanctum. When all was said and done, the only citizen left standing is Eternal Emilitia, who just laughs her ass off about it like she's a fucking Dark Souls character. The White Lady ends up in a cocoon deep within the Queen's gardens.
Oh hey, Dark Souls music.
She decided to place bindings on herself in order to keep her from spreading her.
Why would you say at the beginning of the video, we're only maybe halfway through the video, this is going to be an incredibly long reaction. Why would you say at the beginning of the video that it's a cocoon when now you say it's a binding and not a cocoon?
Seed. She claims that this is because of the shame she feels in helping the Pale King create the vessels, but honestly, it's probably just her kink. The White Lady also diminished her power, possibly as a way to keep herself hidden from unwanted visitors. Outside her cocoon, Drya stood guard, protecting her queen from the violent traitor mantises. Drya is eventually killed off by these bugs, which is actually pretty pathetic if you think about it. I mean, we're talking like the Netgear WPN824N N150 wireless router pathetic. Speaking of great knights dying pathetically, let's move on to Hagamol. Hagamol held the city crest, a key used to open one of the gates to the City of Tears. At some point, Hagamol's armor shell was stolen by a maggot. Now, maggots were generally looked down upon and forced to do menial labor. They were incredibly weak, and basically deserved all of the discrimination they got. But this one maggot decided to turn the tide, so he stole Hagamol's shell so that he could defend his downtrodden brothers. His actions weren't motivated by the infection, but instead was the result of how hierarchical caste systems will always lead to revolution from the working class, and that true freedom can only be achieved blah blah blah, capitalism is bad, subscribe to my Patreon. Ogre moved to the Royal Waterways and started living in shit, changing his name to Dung Defender. Now I love wallowing in shit as much as the next guy, but you'd have to really love shit to put up with living with the flukes. The Dung Defender kept an unwavering sense of duty and loyalty to the king, and love for his fellow knights, so much so that he made shit statues of them. How nice. Ogrim acted as the defender of the pipeways, as well as Isma's Grove. A section of the Royal Waterways became filled with acid, and in the middle of it all rests Isma's corpse, which has been overcome by plant life. Isma is likely the one responsible for this acid blight, but we have no idea what happened to her. Hornet's whereabouts during this time are fairly mysterious. We know that she departed Deep Nest and didn't return until the events of the game. At some point, she took to guarding Halnest from intruding warriors, as well as the cast-off shell in the Kingdom's Edge. Despite the Kingdom's woes at large, Fortunately, this fate did not befall one of the fandom's favorite characters. The Menderbugs continued to fix the broken signs and wayposts of Hallownest. From a diary entry, we can see that one Menderbug in particular had found himself on the precipice of a long and loving relationship.
Hello again, diary. Not long now until the next Minder Bash. For us stealthy types, we're a riotous bunch when we get together, and Minderberry kept flashing me that smile. It might be time to muster my courage and act on it.
They're fake then, yes? These diary entries of the Menderbugs are fake then, yes? Because this can't be real.
I love my home and my life, but sharing it with another? Why, that'd be the berry on top.
Greenpath also underwent some changes during this time. The Mosskin were waiting for Un's call, which would bring them back into the dream they were originally born from. But for some reason, Un's strength deteriorated. We don't know why this happened exactly. Was it due to the White Lady claiming part of her kingdom? Was it somehow due to the infection? Some Mosskin believe that Un went into hiding, but it appears as though Un is, in fact, calling to her children. But many of the Mosskin are unable to hear her call. Instead, many Mosskin seem to have taken the Radiance's infection into their leaves, which might explain why Greenpath became overgrown with vegetation despite Un's deteriorating powers. Mossy vagabonds even openly chose to forsake Un and worship the Radiance. Another tribe to be screwed over by the Radiance is the Hive, which fell to the infection after the death of their leader, Hive Queen Vespa. But it appears as though this had little effect on their civilization. The Radiance's hive mind was already familiar to the bees, since the hive probably operated under something similar already. So in other words, the hive probably made out the best in this whole situation. Let's turn our attention back to the moths. After all, it's their god that keeps killing everybody. While the moth tribe didn't fare too well.
I'm trying to remember, but did fighting the bees result in white or orange blood, so to say, when they were struck? I don't remember anymore. Because all of the infected enemies would have orange blood, and all of the non-infected ones would have, like, save for void beings, would have white blood. Yes. So I don't remember, actually, but I think they actually escaped the infection.
Actually, as pretty much the entire tribe died out. The only known survivor is the Seer. Despite
the Hive Knight, I know, does explode in orange. Like, the explosion after the Hive Knight is defeated, I know, is orange. So he was infected. But I don't know about any of the others, if they were infected or not. They didn't have orange eyes.
the loss of her tribe, the seer continued to tend to the graves in the resting grounds, while also waiting the arrival of the Wielder, a mysterious being that her tribe has dreamt of for a while. In the Kingdom's Edge, the land became covered in ash molting off of the worm's decomposing corpse. The Colosseum of Fools continued to thrive. The Lord Fool passed away at some point, but nobody really seems to notice or even care.
No! Nor does anyone seem to point out the fact that he also has black tear tracks, which could indicate exposure to the void being the reason for the Lord Fool's death. Interesting.
The fools inside the Colosseum were infected, but still seem to have maintained control over themselves. It seems possible that these bugs took in the infection willingly, similar to the Traitor Lord and his followers. This would have given them an edge in combat, similar to using steroids, but without the whole shrinking testicles thing. However, even the Traitor Lord and his followers went mad, so what makes these fools any more special? As for the Pale King's champion, the Pale Lurker, well, she just went the normal kind of insane. There appears to have been another unforeseen event with the Pale King's plan. When the Hollow Knight was originally chosen, the door to the Abyss was sealed, trapping the discarded vessels within. But apparently, some vessels didn't get the memo. Vessel corpses can be found littered throughout the kingdom.
I'm currently so distracted by the music. This is a great, I want I'm going to absolutely look up all of these piano covers of the various Hollow Knight soundtracks because they sound amazing. And Mantis Woods in particular is one of my favorites, so I'm completely distracted by that right now. I think I'm going to have to go back to listen to it again. No. What was he saying? Something about vessels being found, corpses of vessels being found throughout Hollowness.
There's one in the Ancient Basin, one in Greenpath, and several trapped in Nosk's lair in Deep Nest. Another vessel that escaped from the abyss.
Which does lead to the question of how did they get out of the abyss? Because supposedly the entrance to the abyss that was, sealed after the Pale King had found his vessel was the only exit possible. So the question emerges then, how did the vessels escape? I do have a couple of theories regarding that, but this is not the place to share them.
This is the player character, the Knight.
The exact details
on how the vessels escaped the abyss is unclear. There are indications that they might have slipped into Deep Nest through some old
I spoke too soon. He did mention it.
Passageway, given void influences in part of the area, and all the corpses found in Nosk's lair. At some point, all entrances to Hollownest were closed off, with the old well-endured mouth being the only way to sneak back in. Despite this, several people have wormed their way into the kingdom, with few ever returning. Characters like Relic Seeker Lem seemed content to just pillage artifacts from the ruined kingdom, but other bugs seemed interested in something greater. In the Howling Cliffs rests the corpse of a member of the Grim Troop. The task of this bug appears to have been to seek out Hollownest, so that the troop might be summoned to the kingdom in the future. The Grim Troop are basically a group of bugs that serve a higher being known as the Nightmare Heart. The troop keeps the heart alive by feeding on the nightmares of fallen kingdoms. This process also involves sacrificing the troop master to his own child because, hey, look at this cool ass boss battle. Another important group that traveled to Hallown.
I do have a theory regarding that. Of course I have a theory regarding that. Like, the Grim Troop DLC is my favorite DLC in the entire game, and one of my favorite quest lines as well. If you look at the Nightmare Heart during Nightmare King Grim's boss fight, you'll notice that it's actually not whole. It is torn, and it has like sutured wounds, essentially, more or less. Which kind of makes me think, oh no. If you want my theory regarding the Nightmare Troop, look up my episodes regarding the Nightmare King. They have the appropriate thumbnail. Look them up. I do share my theory there. I'm not going to do it now because this video is going to be long enough already.
Next are the God Seekers. After being abandoned by their old gods, the gods of thunder and the gods of rain, these bugs left their home in the land of storms, seeking out a new god to
This is new. Why have I missed it?
Worship. The God Seekers look to gods to save them from their own silent mind. While traveling through the wastelands, the God Seekers constructed devices called God Tuners, which helped them seek out new gods. Through this device, they were able to detect the lingering power of the Pale King and find their way to Hallownest. When they arrived, however, the God Seeker was forced into hibernation. She was encased in a strange sarcophagus-like cocoon, which was itself chained up with a lock. It's not clear how this forced hibernation worked, seeing as the cocoon appears to have been made by the God Seeker herself. As for who put the cocoon in chains...
I did wonder about that. Because generally a sarcophagus is very difficult to open. They're not meant to be opened. And if they are opened, it does take a fair amount of effort to actually open one. And in addition to being a sarcophagus, to being trapped, placed into a sarcophagus, there was also a chain placed on top of that. It's similar to the many coffins in Bloodborne around Yharnam that are also chained shut. So it's interesting to consider why the Godseeker was placed in such a in such a thing. Because she must have been placed in that. She must have been placed in that. Doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for that not to be the case.
I think the most likely candidate is the Dung Defender, considering how the Godseeker's cocoon is found in the junk pit in the waterways, an area the Dung Defender has tasked himself with protecting.
Interesting theory. Interesting theory. Nothing really to support it though, aside from the location. But I would like to point out that the part of the Royal Waterways that the Dung Defender is closest to, well, is located in, is the far right side, whereas the junk pit is on the far left side of the Royal Waterways. And it makes sense for the Dung Defender to be where he is because on the one hand, across from the Dung Defender is Isma's Grove, and well, we've already mentioned that he might have had at least a bit of a crush on Isma. But more importantly, what is between the Dung Defender's abode and Isma's Grove is the broken elevator shaft leading down into the ancient basin, and aka the palace grounds. So it makes sense for the Dung Defender to be located where he is, and I can easily believe that he would defend that particular area of the Royal Waterways. What I cannot imagine is him actually defending the rest of the waterways. Because I feel that if he had defended it, then probably the beings such as the Flukemar and the Flukes would not have actually, well, they would not have come into being, I think. There is just nothing connecting the Dung Defender with this sarcophagus outside of them being both located in the Royal Waterways.
This was the general picture of Hallownest after the Hollow Knight was sealed inside the Temple of the Black Egg. The kingdom was stuck in a kind of stasis, with the Pale King civilization destroyed and the Radiance unable to break free from her chains. The Pale King was rebelling against nature, trying to keep his work standing indefinitely. The stasis over Hallownest held for an age. How long is that exactly? Well, we have no idea.
No.
As I'm sure you've noticed, there really isn't a timeline for anything that happens in this game.
Much like with the Soulsborne games.
We also have no idea how long any of these bugs can actually live. Elderbug wasn't around to see the Stagways open, but we know several other characters were, implying that Elderbug is probably one of the youngest characters in the whole game. But this stasis over Hallownest wasn't going to last forever. At some point, the Radiance erupted out of the Hollow Knight, cracking its shell and releasing a loud and powerful roar. The amount of infection leaking out of the Hollow Knight became even greater. The many corpses that lined the roads and cities of the kingdom sprang to life with the amplified power of the infection. This strengthened infection prompted the departure of the Weavers back to their old home. Now this old home might actually
How do we know when the Weavers left? Obviously, it must have been after Hornet's birth. That much is clear. But I don't think that there was any indication, anything specific that mentioned, I don't know, a vague time frame for their departure.
Be Farloom, the kingdom in which Hollow Knight Silksong takes place. But the amount of knowledge we have about Silksong right now is
Oh right, this was before Silksong, right?
pathetic, so I'm not saying that's confirmed or anything. This is also around the time that Quirrell arrives back in Hallownest. His memory of Motomon appears to have been clouded due to his time outside of Hallownest. These events are depicted in the Quirrell prequel comic, which also shows an image of the Hollow Knight with a pre-cracked shell.
Which I have to read at some point.
This could mean that Quirrell's arrival happens roughly the same time the Hollow Knight's shell cracks. At around the same time Quirrell arrives in Hallownest, we also see the arrival of the player character, who is commonly referred to as the Knight.
Ghost.
The Knight was one of the lucky vessels that was able to make its way out of the abyss. Somehow the Knight ended up venturing beyond Hallownest and into the wilds beyond. It's implied that the Knight was called to Hallownest by either the sealed Hollow Knight or the Radiance within. Regardless, once the knight shows up and yeets itself off this cliff, the actual game of Hollow Knight finally begins. Now, there's a lot of details we could get into. Hallownest is full of NPCs and bosses, each with their own stories to tell. But to be honest, I don't think we need to go through all of them, since their stories are relatively straightforward. For example, let's look at the Brooding Moloch. So why is the Brooding Moloch brooding? Because all its friends are dead. And there you go, that's the lore for the Brooding Moloch. Also, it's the only character in the game with a visible asshole. Now, did you really need me to explain that to you? Probably not.
No.
So instead, I'm just going to talk about the interactions relating to Hollow Knight's main story. The knight is eventually noticed by Hornet, who lures it deep into Greenpath. There, Hornet attempts to kill the knight, claiming that she knows what it would try to do. At this point, Hornet views the knight as being too weak. After the fight, Hornet can be found in the City of Tears, next to the statue of the Hollow Knight. Hornet mentions that the knight has gained a resilience, due to the time it spent in the void beyond Hallownest. This could be referring to the fact that some of those who leave Hallownest lose their memories, meaning the knight would have no memories of its own tragic conception. Hornet tells the knight that if it seeks to continue the stasis that keeps Hallownest standing, it must seek the Graven Ash, which is referring to the Kingdom's Edge. At this moment, Hornet sees the knight as a possible replacement for the Hollow Knight. Basically, the knight could break the seals that keep the Hollow Knight locked away, defeat the Hollow Knight, and contain the infection itself. It's at this point that I should mention that Hollow Knight actually has 5 different endings, because of course it would. I'm going to be explaining each of these endings in this video, as they each give us a different glimpse into the mechanics of Hollow Knight's world.
Yes.
Now, to get the easiest ending to Hollow Knight, Hornet's instructions to go to the Kingdom's Edge can be ignored completely. If the knight stumbles upon the resting grounds, the 3 dreamers will appear and cast the knight into the dream realm. There, Seer will come to the knight's rescue and grant it the Dream Nail, a special blade that can tear the veil between the real world and the dream world. With the Dream Nail, the knight can venture to the resting places of the 3 dreamers, curb stomp their asses, and unlock the entrance to the Black Egg. Inside the egg, the knight finds the Hollow Knight chained up, silently watching over it. Once the chains are broken, the Hollow Knight screams with that familiar Radiance roar and pursues the knight. As the fight progresses, the Hollow Knight starts trying to kill itself, Quirrell style. But then the Radiance starts using the Hollow Knight's body to perform her own attacks. Once defeated, the Hollow Knight begins to spew infection all over the place. The knight can then focus the infection into itself. This results in the first ending of the game, called Hollow Knight. In this ending, the knight usurps the Hollow Knight, prolonging the stasis over Hallownest. New chains and bindings appear out of fuck if I know, and contain the knight, and a new seal is placed over the entrance to the Black Egg. Now there is one giant question looming over this ending. Can the knight actually contain the infection indefinitely?
No.
Or will the Radiant still manage to break free one day?
Yep.
Before we answer this question, let's look at some of the other events that can transpire while playing the game. If the player chooses to go to Kingdom's Edge, Hornet will challenge the knight one last time, as a final test of strength. After her defeat, Hornet allows the knight to access the cast-off shell, where the Pale King was originally hatched. By interacting with this egg, the knight's shell is marked with the King's brand, technically making the knight the new ruler of Hallownest. With the King's brand, the knight can now open the entrance to the Abyss and discover the place of its birth. When leaving the Abyss, the knight can encounter Hornet again, where for the first time, Hornet suggests that there are actually 2 outcomes the knight can enact. She tells the knight that it can either prolong Hallownest stasis, or face the heart of the Kingdom's infection. Within the knight, Hornet sees a chance for change. Instead of just replacing the Hollow Knight, Hornet believes that it may be possible to get rid of the infection completely by using the void inside of the knight. After visiting the Abyss and obtaining the Shade Cloak, the knight is capable of reaching the White Lady, hidden away in the Queen's Gardens. The White Lady tells the knight that she has been awaiting a vessel to accept a gift, that gift being 1/2 of a charm called the King's Soul, which she claims will give the knight more power. The White Lady goes on to explain that she can feel the weakening of the Hollow Knight within her roots. She tells the knight that it is free of the blemishes that made the Hollow Knight a flawed vessel. From this dialogue, it is implied that the knight truly is a...
So, this is the part where I once again stop and share my own interpretation, which I think is honestly far more likely, and that is that the pale lady, the white lady, the queen is kind of in denial. Is kind of in denial actually, and that denial it stems from the immense regret she feels about participating in the Pale King's plan for the Hollow Knight solution, essentially. And so when she sees this vessel, she kind of just refuses to even consider the possibility that this vessel too is impure and not capable of indefinitely keeping the radiance at bay.
Pure vessel, capable of containing the radiance successfully. But it's not quite that simple, so we're gonna have to dig a bit deeper into this. Basically, we're gonna need to answer a simple question. What exactly does it mean to be a Hollow Knight? Despite the White Lady's words, we have a number of...
What was that? What was that? Is that another NPC I've managed to... How have I managed to miss this much?
A bit deeper into this.
I thought it was thorough.
Basically, we're gonna need to answer a simple question.
I'm sorry, I went back too far.
What exactly does it mean to be a Hollow Knight?
Steel Soul Djinn. Steel Soul Djinn. It refuses to trade, it has a will all its own, can refuse, Djinn will keep waiting until the gift comes. Okay, one. Where is this? Because I can't even remotely imagine where this is located. Maybe the Howling Cliffs somewhere? I don't know. And two, how have I missed this? Is this an NPC that gets unlocked only after the player attempts Steel Soul mode, sorry for the pronunciation there. Because I think it was after achieving the first ending, the player can attempt a Steel Soul playthrough, which, as I understand it, is essentially a no-death run. And we do have Steel Soul in the name here.
Despite the White Lady's words, we have a number of instances where the characters and item descriptions mention that the
under
knight
the
has
bearer's
a will, and
yes.
maybe even a mind. But from the Pale King's dialogue when describing the Hollow Knight, it is stated that a pure vessel has no mind or will.
No.
So is the White Lady wrong? Or maybe
yeah,
even
she's
lying?
in denial.
Her
Not
eyes
lying.
have been clouded
just
by
in
time,
denial.
and she can be tricked into thinking that Ogrim is in the room when the knight is wearing the Defender's Crest charm.
Mm-hmm.
She also thinks that Drya is still alive, which,
No. No, alas.
So maybe the White Lady is just senile. My problem with that theory is that the White Lady states that the vessels stand out to her clearly in a misted world, due to them being her spawn. She also questions whether or not the knight sought her aid, which would imply that the knight must have some kind of will.
Mm-hmm.
So for whatever reason, the White Lady thinks the knight is still capable of containing the radiance, even if it's still able to make decisions.
She's just
After
in denial.
all, the Hollow Knight was considered pure, but they still taught it how to wield a fucking sword. I mean, if the knight were truly and completely hollow in a literal sense, it probably shouldn't even be able to walk, or draw a map, or open a goddamn...
Now that's an interesting question. That's an interesting question. What constitutes as a will and a mind? I'd say the ability to walk is just basic instinct. Or abilities like walking are basic instinct. It's things like agreeing to a trade, for example, or changing a mind, or deciding to do anything, making a choice that, you know, that are conscious decisions that require a mind and that require a will. And wielding a needle is essentially a skill that can be taught. I don't think that necessarily requires a mind. Just repetition, 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 as my Tai Chi teacher says.
fake bank account. In short, this whole concept of being hollow is so abstract and hard to define.
It is
I
abstract.
don't really feel comfortable giving a solid answer on whether or not the knight is or isn't truly hollow. And I think the game leaves room open for other interpretations.
It does.
Of course, the White Lady's gift is useless without the other half of the King's Soul. In order to reach it, however, the knight must travel to the White Palace, locked inside the body of a King's Mold. In order to bypass the seal, the knight must use a fully awakened Dream Nail. It can do this by bringing 1800 essence to the seer, allowing her to sharpen the weapon's blade. If the knight does this, the seer remarks that the knight truly is the wielder that her tribe has been dreaming of. There's no explicit reason why the Moth tribe was dreaming about this supposed wielder so much, but it seems like they believe the wielder would wash away the crimes the Moth tribe committed by turning their backs on the Radiants. The seer seems to know that the knight might kill the Radiants, and she seems accepting of it, ready for her and her tribe to disappear and be forgotten forever. With the awoken Dream Nail in hand, the knight can travel to the Pale King's refuge and locate the other half of the King's Soul charm. When equipped, the King's Soul provides a never-ending supply of soul, making it almost useful if it weren't for the insanely high cost of the charm, and the painfully slow rate at which it increases, and the fact that the charm will get replaced in about 5 minutes after you get it. The King's Soul charm itself symbolizes the union between two higher beings. To me, this implies that the King's Soul is a representation of a vessel, which also was created by the union of two higher beings. With the King's Soul in their inventory, the knight now gains access to an area in the abyss called the Birthplace. In this massive pile of vessel shells, the knight can find a giant egg.
I have my own theory regarding what the King's Soul actually is, the charm and the two halves, what they actually are. And I share that theory, I think, in the part of my playthrough where I actually meet the White Lady.
Nailing the egg allows the knight to access its own memory when it was cast down into the abyss. From viewing that memory, the King's Soul charm is replaced with the Void Heart charm. The recollection of this event allows the knight to come to terms with the void inside itself. Once the knight has the Void Heart, the shades in the abyss no longer attack it, and that strange creature that gives the knight the Shade Cloak calls it the Lord of Shades. In other words, the knight has now bound the once fragmented void under its own will, allowing it to control the void in a powerful new way. With the union of the void, the Pale King, and the White Lady, the knight has gained a strength before unseen. It is with this charm that 2 additional endings become unlocked. Hornet will now be standing outside of the Black Egg, offering to help the knight should the opportunity arrive. Midway through the fight with the Hollow Knight, Hornet rushes into battle, subduing the Hollow Knight and piercing its shell. It's at this point that the knight is given the perfect opportunity to enter into the mind of its sibling, fighting the source of the infection head on, and finally putting an end to the Radiance's tyranny.
Cuts to ending 2.
Or it can just stand there and let Hornet get knocked unconscious. If the knight finishes off the Hollow Knight as usual, the sealed sibling ending occurs.
Yeah,
basically,
my least
it's
favorite.
the same as the Hollow Knight ending,
Least
but
favorite.
now Hornet is in the room too, and her face appears on the door of the Black Egg. It's not clear what exactly this means for Hallownest.
What do you mean it's not clear what this means for Hallownest? It's pretty clear in my humblest of opinions. So I mentioned this particular thought when I myself got around to unlocking the second ending, which again is if you guys want to see, like, to hear my full thoughts on that, it's in the part of my playthrough where the thumbnail is the first appearance of the Radiance. It's the first thumbnail featuring the Radiance. It's in that episode. No, it's in the second one. Sorry, in the second one. Sorry, it's in the video with the thumbnail, the second thumbnail appearance of the Radiance in my playthrough. But essentially the sealed siblings theory is the worst possible... The sealed siblings theory. The sealed siblings ending is the worst one possible. It's the worst one possible of all of the endings, because there is truly absolutely no hope whatsoever for Hallownest after it. Because in order for, like, say that another vessel emerged somehow from the abyss, or had emerged and, like Ghost, traveled outside of Hallownest and then decided to return, once, say, in the style of the Hollow Knight, the infection broke out of Ghost and the cry summoned another vessel to Hallownest, the vessel, even if it went through the entirety of Hollownest and grew stronger, would have no way inside the temple. Because in order to break the seal, the new vessel would have to be able to reach Hornet, and Hornet is inside the seal. So, on the one hand, it's a foolproof seal. It's a kind of protection that cannot be broken through, because in order to break through it, you'd actually have to have access to something inside that seal. So that makes going inside into the seal impossible, therefore making it impossible to actually confront Ghost, the failed then vessel of the infection. And that means that sooner or later the Radiance is going to completely break free and utterly and totally doom Hollownest even more than it already is. So it's the worst possible ending.
Imply that Hornet is now a dreamer, but she's inside the temple.
Oh, you're about to mention it.
No one can actually get in there to kill her should the night ever start leaking infection. At the same
I should start listening more than reacting.
time, Hornet mentions that the bindings of the Black Egg would drain her, so she's probably just going to die anyway, right? Generally, people consider this to be one of the worst endings.
The worst.
But it's worth pointing out that Team Cherry doesn't support.
All endings are equally canon. We're not into true endings. You choose the path yourself. We'll do our best in all future Hollow Knight content to account for all of them. Ari Gibson. I have been informed, because this video was created 3 years ago? No. Hollow Knight was released in 2017, I think, and he said at the beginning that this was 3 years already ago. So this was created 6-ish years ago at this point. But since then, Silksong has come out, and I've been informed that 1 or even 2 of the 5 endings are actually the canon endings.
Or any one ending as being the true ending. Each ending is canonical in its own right, and honestly, this ending isn't the worst.
Really?
At least the Knight and Hornet will get to spend some quality time
It's
together.
the worst.
If the Knight does dream of the Hollow Knight, it will be taken to an arena where it can finally fight the Radiance head-on. But the Knight isn't alone, as the other shades from the Abyss will appear in order to help corner the Radiance. Eventually, the Radiance gets trapped in the tendrils of the Void. The Knight bitch slaps her a couple times,
Pretty
and
much.
then the Radiance is consumed into the darkness. The Black Egg then appears to turn to shadows, and the Void seeps down into the ground. Hornet awakens to find the Knight's broken shell lying on the floor. We get one final shot of the Shades in the Abyss going to rest, and the game is over. This ending is called the Dream No More ending. The Radiance is gone, and Hallownest is finally free from her infection.
It's actually a good ending.
Now I think it's fair to ask a few questions about how the Dream No More ending comes about. When the Hollow Knight was initially chosen to become the pure vessel, the Abyss was sealed up, and the rest of the vessels were left to rot away. But somehow, vessels ended up outside of the Abyss, and then one of those vessels was used to replace the Hollow Knight.
I do have a theory regarding that.
Exactly
No
how much
support
of this operation
for it,
was
though.
planned, if at all? The White Lady was waiting for a vessel. Did she have any communication with Hornet? Hornet was guarding the King's Brand, the only way for a vessel to enter the Abyss. How did she know it was necessary to guard the King's Brand from weaker vessels?
Because it's Plan B.
Hell, if the vessels did escape the Abyss by themselves, wouldn't it be pointless to guard the King's Brand, since the vessels could just creep back into the Abyss the same way? I'm not going to provide any good answers to these questions, because God forbid I answer anything in this entire video. But I do want to point out that no plans to actually produce the Dream No More ending are explicitly stated in-game. So we can only speculate as to whether or not the White Lady or Hornet, or maybe even the Pale King, knew that they could defeat the Radiance by creating a Lord of
Once again, I'll just say I have a lot of thoughts on that, and I shared all of those thoughts at, I think it was when I met the White Lady.
Shades like the Knight.
Look it up if you
Regardless,
want.
the next 2 endings were definitely not
It was
planned.
extensive.
In fact, the last 2 endings that were added in the Godmaster update almost feel out of place. The Godseekers basically hijack everything to the point where you don't even have to enter the Temple of the Black Egg to beat the game. That's like beating Mario Bros without ever seeing Bowser. But on the other hand, the Godmaster endings basically reinforce that Hallownest does not exist in a vacuum, which can help the world of Hollow Knight feel more real. Because what else is reality but just a bunch of random chaotic stuff happening all the time? If the knight finds the Godseeker in the junk pit, it will be able to enter her mind and refight all the bosses in the game. This is part of the Godseeker's ritual. They basically attune to the resonance of gods through ritual combat. This allows them to ascend their minds higher and eventually, through the use of godly focus, achieve communication with the god sleeping in Hallownest's heart, the Radiance.
Absolute
Now I know
radiance.
what you're thinking. That's a pretty convoluted little religious practice they have going on here. What's next? Are they going to start measuring the knight's Theon levels? It's pretty complicated, but the point is, these Godseekers have some serious capabilities to fuck things up in Hallownest, as we're about to see. As the knight makes it further and further through the 4 pantheons, the Godseekers get closer and closer to making contact with the Radiance, locked away inside the Hollow Knight. At the end of the 4th pantheon, the Radiance makes herself aware in this strange reunion cutscene between the vessels. But she isn't the only one to make an appearance. The Void itself appears to go on the attack, rising up to meet the Radiance's call. It's at this point that the final challenge, the Pantheon of Hallownest, becomes available.
Interesting. I never considered the possibility that maybe the Godseeker wasn't capable of reaching the God of Gods, aka the Absolute Radiance. Never occurred to me that that might be the case, because it didn't seem to me as if... Although on the other hand, I don't see any specific support for that. See, this is something that really annoys me about this video. There are all of these theories mentioned, or ideas mentioned, or speculations mentioned, and none of the supportive, none of the evidence for those theories shown, or whatever might have hinted at that, outside of that one moment where he said that Lurien was connected with the Collector. And that is very, very, very weak. A very weak link at best, I think. But I don't know. Could that be possible? Could that be possible that the Godseeker didn't actually have access to all of these gods until Ghost showed them the way, as it were, or opened the way to them, in a sense? I keep thinking about the Godseeker's dialogue just prior to the Pure Vessels fight at the end of the 4th Pantheon. I keep thinking about it, where the Godseeker mentions that at first they feared the vessel, but now they are kind of in awe of it, or something like that, or that they should have always suspected or expected or been aware of its power. Which kind of indicates that they weren't aware of it before, but they are aware of it now. Could it be that they're aware of it now because Ghost opened the way to the Pure Vessel for them? Doesn't make a lot of sense, to be honest. And I don't know how how much the Hall of Gods is canonical, if I may call it that. Because at the end, whenever the player defeats the Radiance, or at least this was the case with the attuned and descended forms of the Radiance, the player gets a message of essentially something along the lines of, it's impressive that you managed to defeat the God of Gods here, but you have the ability to do the same with the God of Gods' Absolute Radiance being at the very top of the 5th Pantheon. We think not. Which indicates that they are aware of the Radiance being at the very top of the Pantheon, course, just being aware that someone is located at, like, a higher floor doesn't necessarily mean that they've actually met that person. One does not actually necessarily mean the other. Interesting.
The Godseeker finally acknowledges the knight as being more than just a simple cringer, and they begin to watch the knight more intently. After defeating like a bazillion bosses in the final pantheon, the knight finally comes face to face with the Absolute Radiance, a stronger, more enhanced version of the game's final boss. Finally, the stage is set. After roughly 40 minutes of intense agony and tedious boss battles,
a little bit more
the
than
knight
that,
has
but
finally
yeah.
reached the ultimate enemy, responsible for the destruction of Hallownest. Truly, this will be a battle for the ages. But first, let's check in on our old pal Menderbug. As it turns out, he's
The diary entries are fake, right? They're fake. They have to be fake, right?
still alive when the knight arrives in Hallownest, and he's still fulfilling his duty after all this time. Let's take one last look at his diary.
My lovely diary. Someone's gone and broke my favourite sign. Right there, at the top of the crossroads. Keeps happening, too. But you know, I just can't get mad about it. I should be thanking them, really. More chances to fix that beautiful, complex sign. And I've stocked up on spare parts, so I've no fear it'll ever stay broken for long.
Unfortunately, the only way to ever read the Menderbug's diary is to kill him in cold blood. I'm not sure why Team Cherry thought this was necessary, but the general consensus on Reddit is that they are bloodthirsty warmongers, so it checks out. But at least Menderbug's last moments will be spent fixing one of his favorite signs in the Forgotten Crossroads. It's comforting to think that his final seconds of consciousness were spent in total bliss, before we sent him hurtling into the infinite chasm.
So the diary entries are real? There is a Menderberry? No. I'm so confused. I'm so confused about the Menderbugs. Please someone tell me in the comments below about the Menderbugs. And the diary entries and or entries. Or entry. Or no, does he mean that we can read the diary entry of the Menderbug thanks to the Menderbug appearing after having been killed in the Hunter's Journal? Or is there an actual location where you can read a diary entry? I cannot discount this possibility. Not after Bretta's fanfiction. Not after Bretta's fanfiction chapters. I cannot discount finding diary entries for the Menderbug after that.
That is Oblivion. Well, anyways, the alternate fight between the Knight and the Radiance plays out differently than in the vanilla ending. This time around, the Knight is not accompanied by any shades.
No.
Instead, after defeating
We become
the Radiance,
the Shade
the
God.
Knight seems to transform into this monstrosity. Now this creature goes by many names. The God of Gods, the Lord...
Is that the reward for getting all of the bosses radiant? Oh my god, that looks so awesome. That looks so cool. Well, now I definitely have to get all of them radiant, don't I? Oh my goodness, that looks so cool. Anyway, my own name for the ascended version of Ghost after defeating the Absolute Radiance at the top of the 5th Pantheon is Shade God.
Shade.
Because he's the new God of Gods and
the Void Entity.
He's the Lord of Shades.
But I don't really like any of those, so I will just call him Bill. Bill proceeds to completely annihilate the Radiance in spectacular fashion. We are then treated to the Embrace the Void ending. Bill comes back down from the sky, dropping into the rest of Godhome. The Godseeker starts to get pulled into Bill by Void tendrils. We then cut to the Godseeker in the junk pit. Void starts leaking out of her eyes, and it appears as though Bill is making an escape back into the real world, which is probably a bad thing? Finally, we see Hornet standing outside of the Black Egg as
no
the
indication of it
infection begins to
being a
disappear from
necessarily
nearby
bad thing.
vines. Hornet hears footsteps coming from inside the Black Egg as the Hollow Knight reveals itself to her and the two prepare for combat. So from this cutscene, we can see that the Radiance's death in Godhome actually did kill her for real, meaning that the infection over Hallownest is now gone. This
Yes,
means the seals
an
inside the
actual
Black Egg
solution.
probably wore off, allowing the Hollow Knight to escape its prison. In other words, the Embrace the Void ending is a goddamn cliffhanger, and we have no idea how Team Cherry plans to follow this up. The Hollow Knight is running loose in Hallownest, and the Knight has transformed into a raging void monster.
Like, I'd like to think that the Hollow Knight actually regained... I was about to say their mind. Well, yeah, actually, they regained their mind. I'd like to think that they regained their mind because with the infection and the radiance being completely and utterly gone, as indicated by it draining away entirely from the roots, and completely disappearing, like the same would happen for the Hollow Knight, who was infected, but now probably no longer is. Therefore, returning to just being themselves. Themselves.
That might try to destroy the entire kingdom, or at least what's left of it. What's even more strange about this ending is that the announced sequel, Hollow Knight Silksong, doesn't seem to be related to this ending at all. But that's a whole different shit show.
What is that?
Obviously,
Procession?
the biggest mystery surrounding this ending is the appearance of Bill.
I've never seen any of the trailers for Silksong, except for the one that they showed unexpectedly. When was it? Mid-August. Mid-August? Yeah, mid-August roughly, when they announced to the entire world that Silksong would finally be released at the, what was it? The beginning of September? 2nd of September, I think it was? Something like that. So yeah, that's the only trailer I've ever seen of Silksong. I haven't seen any of the ones that appeared apparently between the release of Hollow Knight and the creation of this video.
Did this creature exist in the void already? Or was it somehow willed into existence by the power of the Godseekers? Did the Knight turn into this thing, or did it just become a part of it? Examining a statue of this creature and other forms of the Knight grant the player a Hunter's Journal entry for an ancient artifact called the Void Idol, which might imply this creature might have been worshipped by the ancient civilization.
Rare artifact contains a large amount of liquid from the abyss perfectly still. So I've got the journal entries for Void Idol Phase 1 and Phase 2, as it were, because I have gotten all of the gods in the Hall of Gods in both their attuned and ascended forms. And it's always that second line, that second sentence that changes. A large amount of liquid from the abyss perfectly still. Perfectly still. Perfectly under control then. Yeah,
but again,
I don't think that Ghost is going to actually
we don't
be a
know
danger
what
to
this worship of
Hallownest.
Void exactly looked like.
As the
Maybe
Shade
the
God.
Void they worship took the form of something more sinister. There is one thing we know about this monster though. It's weak to flowers. Yes, these things. As it turns out, those delicate flowers that Zamir has stockpiled up her ass are actually useful for something. They contain a strange power that even deters the White Lady from touching one. The Godseeker, however, is...
I kind of regret not yet having gone and delivered the delicate flower to the White Lady, I have to admit, because I'm really, really, really curious about the dialogue there. But I'm intrigued, deeply, deeply intrigued by the delicate flowers because of the fifth ending.
To accept a flower from the Knight. If the player does this, instead of Void being released out into the world, this flower pulls a no you, and the Godseeker and Void disappear into thin air. The flower itself is described as giving off a pale light, which appears to connect it to the pale beings. Like I said before, pale beings appear to be some form of top-tier gods. As of right now, we are only aware of two, the Pale King and the White Lady, but the fact that Zamir brought these pale flowers from a faraway land implies that there are definitely more of them out there. Another small hint of the existence of pale beings are the pale ore items that can be found all over Hallownest. Did these come...
So So it's been a long time. Sorry that I paused. But it just occurred to me that I'd completely and totally forgotten about the existence of Pale Ore because I got my nail upgraded to its third and final level so long ago. I just don't remember. I don't even remember the description of the Pale Ore anymore. But I'm relatively certain that it doesn't necessarily... I don't think it has anything to do with pale beings. I think. Maybe.
From the Pale King? Or possibly some other pale being? And what exactly are they? Are they poop? In general, the Godmaster endings appear to be doing a lot of setup for future Hollow Knight content. Like I said before, Hollow Knight Silksong doesn't seem to connect to these events on the surface, so we are in a bit of a bind when trying to discuss what these endings actually mean for the greater narrative Team Cherry is building. There's definitely a lot more to consider about what the pale beings are and what properties they possess.
That was lava.
And we also have plenty of questions surrounding the Void and how bugs have interacted with it in the past. It almost feels like we are looking through a keyhole, trying to grasp onto the totality of Team Cherry's creation. How powerful are creatures like Bill and the worms? Where did things like the Void even come from to begin with? How much bigger is the world beyond Hallownest? Is Bardoon into butt stuff? But of course, that's the appeal of a game like Hollow Knight. Having all of the answers to every question would just ruin the mystery of the world. Plus, if we didn't have questions like this to waste our time on, then what else would we be doing with our lives? Go outside? Ugh. And so this video comes to an end. Now I know the average attention span of a YouTube viewer is 9 minutes, so let me leave you with a few takeaways. 1. Hollow Knight is a game about bugs. I know this may come as a shock, but it's true. Watch the video again, and this time, pay attention. You'll notice right away, I promise. 2. Murdering your own babies might not be such a good idea after all.
Definitely
this
not
is
a good
obviously
idea.
just my interpretation of the game's lore. Other people might have different views on the subject of murdering babies, and every opinion is valid, so I don't want to step on anyone's toes or anything. 3. Menderbug is fucking dead. 4. Nothing is certain.
Not in my playthrough.
This video probably has a few flaws in it. Trying to construct a cohesive narrative with the information found in Hollow Knight isn't exactly straightforward. I'm sure my views will change in the future, and I encourage you to explore the lore yourself. 5. And this last point is fairly obvious, but I should mention it anyway. Cory in the House is the best anime.
I feel I've probably watched that show on Disney Channel when I was younger. Just no memory of it. Ah! What was that about the piano collection? Okay, never mind. Following for providing voices. The Superforge Vati video. I'm wondering now if I recognized his voice somewhere. I don't think so.
I'm your man.
Interesting. Okay. Very interesting. Okay, so something that I mentioned throughout the video, and no, maybe I should leave this for the outro. Should I leave it for the outro? I don't know. I'm sorry that this video is going to end up being incredibly long unless I edit it down somehow. And that is entirely going to depend on how other reactors have dealt with, like, have approached the editing process for this particular reaction. But if somehow they have gone the route of leaving the entire video in somehow, then this is going to be incredibly long, and I apologize right now for how long my reaction is probably going to end up being. Because I just had to keep pausing and sharing my own lore theories and understanding. But yeah, I think I'm going to actually leave. I'm going to switch over straight to the outro. So See you in a second. Okie dokie, on to my thoughts about the video. Now, looking at the video as a video, from an editing point of view, I really like the way that the transitions were done. Clearly, hours upon hours upon hours of work must have gone into it, and the end result is that the visual aspect of the video flowed together very nicely with the narrative one. And of course, the choice in music tracks is also something that I quite appreciated, particularly the inclusion of the piano versions of the Hollow Knight soundtrack. I am absolutely 100% going to look them up once I finish with all of this, just so that I can listen to the music without needing to focus on anything else outside of it, the way that I had to during this reaction. So yeah, from an editing standpoint, I quite enjoyed watching this video. Even if there were a handful of moments that I feel were visually and narratively kind of needlessly vulgar, for lack of a better description. I wasn't offended by them or anything, but considering that this is supposed to be a lore video, a video about the lore of the game, I don't feel that they contribute in any way, shape, or form to that aspect of it. But we all have our own style, of course, our own way of doing things, our own personality, and the inclusion of those particular moments in this video, well, they just fit. They just fit. So I can't really say anything negative about it, even if I do feel that they were kind of pointless because they did not contribute to the lore of it. They just didn't contribute anything to it. Oh, speaking of the lore, I was really curious at the start of this reaction to see how much of the lore that I had puzzled together matched up with, or diverged from, the lore that Mossbag had puzzled together. And I have to say that I'm delighted that, for the most part, our lore theories actually matched up. And the parts where they did not, where they diverged, or where Mossbag simply had a theory that or had considered something, an aspect that I had never given much thought to throughout my playthrough, I found those moments very intriguing. Not because I thought that my own interpretation was better than his, or that his was kind of wrong or something like that. I was just really intrigued because he viewed those particular points of the lore from a perspective that had never crossed my mind. And I found that very intriguing. So I really liked that part of this video. The part that I disliked the most regarding the lore is the lack, or usual, for the most part, a lack of a clear line of reasoning that led Mossbag to the conclusions that he had reached. Because usually what you have when a lore seeker decides to create a lore video and present their theory is that they would mention what might have sparked that theory in the first place, and then they would show an item description or character interaction or environment observation or whatever that then they connected to that initial spark, and then eventually they would just demonstrate the path that their line of thinking had taken, and that would eventually lead them to the conclusion that they had reached, to the theory that they had created and put together. Considering that this is meant to be a lore video, I kind of expected to see that here as well, and the fact that I didn't, for the most part, both disappointed and irritated me. And the reason it irritated me is that in those moments where Mossbag would mention something about the lore, in a way that made it seem as if it were obvious and therefore needed no explanation, that would usually be something that I had never thought about, and so I was really curious to find out how he had reached those conclusions. And then he would just go on not to reveal that. So yeah, that was actually kind of irritating. I'm not saying that he didn't do that for the entirety of the video. He did do it on like for certain things, like when he mentioned the potential connection between Lurien and the Collector. And he did, for example, show item descriptions like that of the Void Idol. But overall, he didn't really show the line of thinking, the line of reasoning that had led him to all of these conclusions about the lore of Hollow Knight. So yeah, I found that kind of irritating, because this is supposed to be a lore video. and that is kind of what I'm used to. I do appreciate, I am going to mention this, I do appreciate that he did not present his theories as fact, but rather, indeed, as his own interpretation of the lore. Without any evidence for it, for the most part, but his own interpretation. Now, all in all, I have to say that I am actually glad that I decided to not just watch this video, but to also record my reaction to it. And I hope that you guys enjoyed this reaction. Even if this video is probably going to end up being over 2 hours long, depending on how other reactors have decided to approach the editing process. And in particular, if they actually decided to leave the entire video in and YouTube did not flag that as an issue. If that is the case, then this video is going to end up being over 2 hours long, and I kind of apologize for that. Sorry. I just couldn't help but mention my own lore theories if they diverged from that which Mossbag mentioned. And there were, of course, also those moments where something that he would say, kind of offhand, that would spark a new lore thought in my own head. And naturally then I would pause the video and share it. It's probably not how this kind of reaction is supposed to be done, so I apologize for all of that. But I did actually enjoy watching this video, and I hope that you guys enjoyed my reaction to it. And if you did, feel free not just to leave a like, subscribe, and look at the link below, but to also share your own lore theories about the lore of Hollow Knight in the comments below. Because as a lore hunter, one of the things I really enjoy is to engage in lore discussion, and I'm really curious to find out how your interpretation of the story of Hollow Knight matches up or maybe diverges from Mossbag's interpretation, from my interpretation. I'm just curious, so feel free to leave your own thoughts about the game's lore in the comments below. And I guess I still really don't know how to end these videos, so I'm just going to say thanks for watching, and I hope that I'll see you in some of my other playthroughs on the channel.